Good evening. We'll call the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Brian or Steve, do you mind calling the roll?
Sure. Ms. Lingalis,
Here.
Ms. Tabachnik,
Here.
Ms. Lankowski,
Here.
Mr. Rowena,
Here.
Ms. Wells,
Here. Here.
Mr. Schulman,
Here.
Mr. Cantor,
Here.
and Mr. Bryce.
Here. All right, we have a quorum for tonight's meeting. Both Anna and Diana are seated. I'll just check numbers. Yes, so both Anna and Diana are seated this evening. This evening we have one application, one public hearing on the agenda and a discussion. This public hearing is focused on a single application and not contemplating future proposals that may be on this site. So just wanted to remind folks about that. So this public hearing is 2025-94, special permit / coastal site plan review for Manresa Osprey LLC, Longshore Avenue, District 5, Block 86, Lots 1 and 2, also known as Manresa Island. Special permit and coastal site plan review application for excavation or grading of more than 1,000 cubic yards of earth material and soil disturbance of 10,000 square feet or more in accordance with section 6.2.2.d of the Norwalk zoning regulations, public hearing, report, and recommended action. The way this will be structured tonight is the applicant will have an opportunity to present on their materials for this application. After that, we will turn to public comment. And then after everyone from the public has had an opportunity to speak, we will turn it back to the applicant to respond to public comments. Throughout that, commissioners may ask questions. I want to thank members of the public who submitted written, submitted written comments for this application, gave us the opportunity to read and review feedback about this application ahead of tonight's hearing. It also gave the applicant an opportunity to read that feedback as well. Tonight we ask that you not read your letters into the record, but instead add a new commentary that you have as we will be reading these or have read these letters submitted. So with that, actually one more piece is we will take a break between hearing the applicant's presentation and the public hearing as we anticipate this being a longer presentation. So with that, who is representing the Manresa project?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Go ahead, Attorney Sachi. Would you like to present?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone, Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Liz Sachi. I'm a partner at Carmody Torrance, Sandak and Hennessy, 1055 Washington Boulevard in Stamford. And I represent Manresa Osprey LLC, which is the owner of the 120-acre Manresa Island land and is the applicant before you this evening on the two applications that Chairman Bryce just identified. It is my privilege to appear before you to present the first of many applications that will be required for your review and action to transform Manresa Island into Manresa Wilds, a privately owned public park, which has come to the city, as you know, through the generosity and vision of Austin and Allison McCord. This proposal is a result of nearly 2 years of site inspection and observation, ecological assessments and analyses, interaction with state agencies, including the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and public engagement to create development, enhancement, and restoration plans and concepts for a resilient, accessible park for all. Once completed, Manresa Wilds will provide 120 acres of publicly accessible land, open space, access to Long Island Sound, the waterfront, along with offering educational, recreational, water-dependent, and water-related activities, and so much more. It's a long-term private investment and effort in the city of Norwalk to transform this land into a resilient ecological preserve and publicly accessible waterfront park. Before we commence our presentation, there are just a little bit of housekeeping that I need to take care of. The applications for special permit and coastal site plan review were submitted to the Department of Planning and Zoning in this commission on December 18th, 2025. Property owners within 100 feet of the subject property were notified by certificate of mailing of the submission of the application on December 29th, 2025, and that certificate was returned to staff and is part of the permanent file. Property owners within 100 feet of the subject property were notified of tonight's public hearing by certified mail, return receipt requested, and the green domestic return receipt cards coupled with copies of any letters that were returned and information on letters that are still in transit, were returned to the Planning and Zoning Office today and are part of the file. Lastly, a public notice sign was installed on the property in accordance with your regulations on January 20th, 26, and that sign remains in place today. I'd like to introduce you now to the development team, many of whom you'll hear from this evening during our presentation. First, Jess Vonacek, the Executive Director of Manresa Wilds, Chris Murphy, the Chief of Design and Construction, Doug Adams, the Planning and Regulatory Affairs Director, Gina Worth, Landscape Architect with Scape, Nicholas Parisi, Project Engineer and Landscape Architect with E-Design Dynamics, Colleen Juarez, Landscape Architect with Scape, Andrew White, a Professional Engineer with Ty and Bond, and Chris Granatini, Professional Engineer and Traffic Engineer with Ty and Bond. The resumes of anyone who will be presenting to you tonight have been submitted and made part of the record and part of the file. And I ask that based upon their education and experience that you qualify all of them as experts. So let's begin. Who is the applicant? Who is the owner? Manresa Osprey LLC is the owner and applicant. The location of the property is on Longshore Avenue on the north side of the property. It is bordered by Longshore to the north, by residentially developed properties in Long Island Sound to the east, and Long Island Sound to the south, along with tidal wetlands to the west. It is District 5, Block 86, Lots 1 and 2. It is currently zoned CD1S, formerly B Residence, and parks are permitted in this zone as of right. The lot is 120 acres, so two lots combined, 120 acres. Existing conditions on the property. The property has been called Manresa Island since it was owned and used as a retreat by the Jesuits up until the 1940s. In fact, its name is derived from a place in Spain where St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, had profound spiritual experiences. From the 1950s to 2013, the property was a coal-fired, then oil-fired electricity generating plant with such owners as Connecticut Light and Power, United Illuminating, and then NRG. The plant ceased operations about 2013. Multiple structures for the electricity plant still exist on the site, such as the turbine hall, the boiler room, and other structures. The oil tanks that existed on the site were demolished and removed in the spring of 2025. Before you tonight are two applications, as Chairman Bryce identified. First is an application for special permit relating to the importation of materials and activity on the site. The second is an application for coastal site plan review relating to some of the proposed activities that are near tidal wetlands. I'd like to be clear, this is not an application or applications before you about the site in total, and there is no activity in, disruption of, or loss of coastal resources such as the tidal wetlands that exist to the west of the existing access way. All of the work is eastward of the existing access way and on the north 28 acres of the property. These applications before you are necessary and required for the creation of what we call the North Forest. It's the first phase of Manresa Wilds. We are only before you tonight for the North Forest, but we'll be returning to you in the future with other applications as we develop the plans and programmatical aspects of Manresa Wilds. So what is the North Forest all about? As I mentioned before, it's the reuse of 28 acres on the north side of the property adjacent to the access drive in Longshore Avenue. Specifically, the North Forest envisions about 1.5 miles of paved and unpaved trails with seating, hammocks, and other amenities, selective tree clearing to create gathering and educational spaces, a 40-space parking lot with a restroom facility, lighting, removal of invasive species, along with wayfinding and interpretive signage. There are 3 pockets to be created. One is called Echo, one is called Gather, one is called Learn, and I will leave that to Gina Worth and others to describe to you more fully during their presentations. To date, we have received SEAC sign-offs, and that stands for Code Enforcement Administration Committee, from the Fire Department, South Norwalk Electric and Water, Transportation, Mobility, and Parking. We received comments from Department of Public Works last Friday and responded to those comments yesterday. And I suspect that the Department of Public Works is fully supportive of the project. There are some additional revisions to plans that they requested, and those will be incorporated into plans that are submitted for a zoning permit should the applications before you this evening be approved. We also received some comments from the Health Department, and similarly, any comments and changes will be incorporated into revised plans. The city's Harbor Management Commission reviewed the proposal on January 28th and found it to be consistent with the Harbor Management Plan and recommended approval. Lastly, the City of Norwalk Conservation Commission approved a petition to amend its wetland map and various files that it has with respect to this property, and to delist 2 areas that were previously classified as wetlands, because those pockets no longer meet the criteria and standards to be classified as wetlands. That's a very general overview of what the North Forest is all about. So at this point, I'd like to have Jess Vonacek take the mic, pick up the reins, and start the application presentation to you in chief. She'll be followed by, I think, Gina Worth, Andrew White, and Chris Granatini, and there may be some others who jump in from time to time. If you have any questions of me, any members of our team during the presentation, please don't hesitate to ask. We will answer them as best we can. We look forward to comments from the public, including those that were received and received and provided to us today. We've reviewed them, we've shared them with our development team, and we look forward to responding to the comments, and do ask to reserve time for rebuttal and summation at the end. At this point, Jess, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to open just with a couple personal remarks about the project. Again, my name is Jess Vonacek, for the record, Executive Director of Manresa Island Corp. When I first met Allison and Austin and I was hired to be able to work on this project, I was given really clear directions, and that was to lead the team to be able to transform this decommissioned power plant with a major focus on safety, water access, community engagement, and ecological restoration into a park that's accessible by the public for multiple generations to come. And tonight we're really excited to be here to begin that process, presenting to you phase 1, the Northern Forest. In saying that, this project will have many phases, all of which Attorney Sachi had mentioned to you before, but all of those will come before you. And we look forward to getting closer to that moment in time with our community engagement meeting number 4, which will take place on February the 19th at the Maritime Aquarium. At 6 p.m. there, we'll share an updated concept plan with the community after a year of community engagement and taking into consideration over 3,000 comments for the project. Before we get into the formal presentation, I did want to share with you just 2 personal observations from the work that we've done over the last year. And the first is just setting the stage for this absolutely amazing 125-acre site. That's 102 acres of coal ash, and just the immense complexity of the site and the expertise of the team that has been put together in order to be able just to start thinking about a site like this. And the second is taking all of that complexity and being able to just understand the immense opportunity that we all collectively have to open this parcel to the public as an educational, recreational park where everyone is welcome, where we can focus on education and focus on being able to allow Norwalk as well as others access to the Long Island Sound in a really meaningful way, but also then taking that complexity and that opportunity and being able to explain and understand how to create case studies for others to be able to implement something that looks like this at those hundreds and hundreds of decommissioned power plant sites across the country. And so with that, we'll start and we'll kick it off with the Northern Forest. We're going to be talking about, next slide, please. We're going to be talking about a site overview as well as history. Thank you. And 2025 master plan. Gina's going to be talking about existing conditions and then the Northern Forest design proposal. And then we'll be talking about traffic. Next slide, please. Since the inception of our team and since we started working on this project, we've really identified with 5 goals that drive our work. And the first is a place like no other, talking about this 125-acre site, 102 acres of coal ash, almost 2 miles of coastline. And that really resonates when we start to see the lack of accessible coastline across our area, across the lower Fairfield County. The second is an island for all, which is an all-inclusive park that is open to the public, where everyone has access to the water in a meaningful way. The third is a model for future forward thinking, which again relates to the ability to use this as a learning opportunity to be able to create case studies and actually create a model for being able to have this type of work be done across the country on other sites. We also have been using the value of a hub for learning and discovery, and this relates to the memorandums of understanding that we have signed currently with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, Sacred Heart University, Wesleyan University, the Norwalk Public School Board, as well as the Maritime Aquarium. We're performing right now pre-construction research in order to be able to build and curate a data set that tells us what species are on the site, what vegetation is on the site, and all of the different coal samples as well as core samples to be able to tell a story about how remediation can change a site looking like this and how ecological restoration can have an impact, a positive impact on a site like this moving forward. And of course, that then relates to the last, a revitalized ecology. Everything that we do on this site relates to ecology. We have been working with Scape, the landscape architect that will be presenting on this project, in order to be able to understand the importance of coastline and how to revitalize that coastline in a naturalized way, knowing that there's almost 2 miles of riprap surrounding this power plant, and the project is meant to be able to connect people with the water and be able to really break that riprap barrier down in order to be able to understand natural ecology. Next slide. And we do that through Manresa Island Corp's mission, and that's to inspire engagement with the waterfront through the abundant public access, top-tier programming, and activities centered around water and opportunities to research and learn about the region's ecology. But to do that, we need to be responsible for the remediation, the design, the restoration, and the build-out and the management of Manresa Wilds moving forward. Next slide. And we'll pivot here into the history of the site, give you a little bit of a snapshot. Attorney Suchi had mentioned the Jesuit retreat from the early 1900s. But if we go to the next slide, we see this really amazing advertisement that was actually posted in the Norwalk Hour in the 1950s that speaks to a referendum that happened here in the city of Norwalk, asking the residents if the site should be a power plant or if the site should be a park. And amazingly, residents of Norwalk voted for the power plant to move forward. And so that's what happened. But we look at this a lot because it reminds us of the decision that was made and how we ended up with this power plant to begin with. And this project is really almost about rewriting history to a certain extent, where we are actually going to establish this piece of land as a park. And we're excited to be able to do that. Next slide. These images show the progression of the site over time. Beginning in the 1930s, the original landmass was only 23 acres. And in the 1950s, when that vote happened, and Planning and Zoning voted 3-1 to be able to bring the power plant to Norwalk, the site started to expand in the east in order to be able to be that footprint for the site. And even at that time, there was just a causeway that connected the Manresa Island to the actual city of Norwalk. In the 1950s, the plant was constructed and it was opened in 1961. And at that point in time, the harbor was constructed and dredged federally, and there was significant coal ash. Throughout the 60s, you started to see that site start to expand in the northern half. In the 1970s, the site went from coal to oil, as Attorney Suchi mentioned. And by the 90s, what you ended up seeing was, of course, the oil tanks that were there to fuel the power plant. And at the point in time that those oil tanks existed on the site, they held 7.5 million gallons of oil each, all within a stone's throw of the Long Island Sound. But in the 90s, we started to see the birch forest emerge in the northern end of the site. And in 2004, the birch forest had really come in. What we have today is over a 90-acre birch forest on the northern portion of our site. Next slide. This is a really fascinating photo for anyone who has not seen it. It's a photo from the 1950s when this 23-acre site existed with a little bit of expansion to the eastern side. You can see Harbor View in the back, and you can see the city of Norwalk even just farther behind that. But this really gives you a good sense of the land mass and what it looked like in the 1950s compared to Harbor View and Plum Island. Next slide. This is the site in 1960 when the power plant was up and running, and you can see that the coal was brought into the barge and by barges into the berthing area, and these conveyor belts brought the coal into the building, the top corner of the building, and that coal yard was there. And then you can see the sprayer, this fly ash pond with basically these coal ash blowers that would blow the coal ash into these watery pond areas and dewatering areas. And if you go to the next slide, again, you can see standing at the site looking more in the north, you across to East Norwalk, you can see Harbor View. But this is not what the site looks like today, right? This is basically where the 90-acre birch forest exists today. But at one point in time, this is actually what the site looked like. And I think this gives a really good perspective on the coal ash that was actually laid in the 1960s and distributed in the 1960s, and what really was lying underneath all of the birch trees as we know them today. Next slide. I want to pivot now to the master plan vision. If we go to the next slide, the master plan was distributed to the public, shared with the public in community meeting number 3 in July when we had our event with over 1,000 people over at the Cove in East Norwalk. And again, we are working to incorporate all of the feedback from all of the community engagement events that we've held over the last year, including some of the events we just held at the Carver Foundation after school program, in order to be able to come back to the community on February the 19th at 6 p.m. at the aquarium to be able to talk about this concept plan. But if we go to the next slide, we're not able to deliver a community asset in a community park without being a good neighbor. This is all about community. This is meant to be a community gift and a philanthropic gift to the community and to the area. And so what does that mean? Well, it means not only cleaning up the site and securing the site, but it also means thinking about multimodal traffic, and it means thinking about lighting and noise pollution. And we're aware that these are concerns, and we're prepared to be able to address them. And I believe that we have with the Northern Forest. And Gina will present on those pieces as she talks about the Northern Forest specifically. But I also think that this slide tells us and sort of brings up the question of why now? Why the Northern Forest now? And we can tell you that originally we thought about Manresa Wilds as one phase, as opening the park in one phase. But as we started to talk to the neighbors and we started to talk to the residents and people in and around Norwalk, we learned a couple things. One was the site has been closed to the public for more than 75 years. And so we've heard, can we please access the park? It would be amazing to be able to access trail systems and be able to access the site that has been closed for so long. The second thing that we've heard from numerous neighbors in Harbor View and also Village Creek and Harbor Shores and Shorefront Park is that they would love to be able to see a portion of the site open, as it almost is an extension of their neighborhood. We see lots of people walking back and forth from Village Creek to Harbor View and vice versa. And they've said, you know, we're walking past a chain link fence and we can see the birch forest. And at one point in time, you know, we were okay to go onto the site, and today we're not. And we would like access, we would like to be able to have access to that. And I think the third for us is that we are motivated in order to be able to provide the community a benefit and an asset. And that means being able to create a safe site that is a remediated site where we have the ability to lift ecology and restore ecology. And that speaks all to the mission statements and the value systems that I had talked about for Manresa Island Corp and what guides our work today. But opening up the Northern Forest allows for early access. It allows for early access to the site in order to be able to see the trail systems and be able to experience the site in a meaningful way, where we have an opportunity to be able to plan out the additional phases of the park moving forward. And with that, I'll transition to Gina to talk more about the Northern Forest proposal.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you all for hearing our proposal this evening. My name is Gina Worth. I'm design principal and partner at Scape Landscape Architecture based in New York City. I've been practicing in the landscape discipline for almost 20 years and at Scape for 16 years, and I am a fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects, as well as a registered landscape architect. I've also had the great pleasure of working on this project since its kind of early conception as a design proposal, and really view the greater project as well as the Northern Forest as a visionary act of land stewardship over generations for the public good. So these are exactly the kinds of projects we want to be working on. The Northern Forest itself, as Jess mentioned, is really about creating a nature-based space that opens this land up to the greater public, and specifically the Norwalk public, for the first time in about 75 years, and provides very passive, very nature-based experiences that directly align with some of the strongest public feedback that we received in our engagement sessions around the project. So I'll talk a little bit about the existing site context, and then I'll move into the design proposal. If you go to the next slide. As a landscape architect, this site is a truly fascinating space. When you look at it kind of on face value, it looks like a rich, beautiful, like layered forest. And aesthetically, it has many beautiful qualities, and it has some real assets. So to talk about the assets of the site itself in its existing conditions, it has this predominantly birch, the gray birch woodland canopy that covers much of the site, providing these really just beautiful moments to experience the color and texture of the bark, the leaves. It'd be a real asset to be able to open this up to the public and have the public experience this space. There's other interesting ecosystems within it, the switchgrass meadow, and some areas of more structurally diverse native dominant vegetation. In a way, the gray birch species is very beautiful, but also very unique and not necessarily setting up a long-term resilient and sustainable forest because it is quite a monoculture of gray birch. And so that is something we're aiming to improve and help diversify with this plan. We've also seen observations of critical wildlife, mostly around the edges of the site, in particular areas where we're interfacing with the coastal edges. The site also has some significant challenges and design opportunities embedded within it. It has a very substantial amount of invasive species existence and kind of colonization that have taken over portions of the site. Phragmites, Russian olive, ailanthus are predominant species, particularly in these areas shown in red. There are areas where the invasion pressure is more dense than others. And so these areas shown in red are where the invasive species are the most densely populated. It also suffers from extensive deer herbivory. And so a management plan for that is under place. And then as many have mentioned, setting up the context for this evening, it has very human altered soils. So it looks like a pristine landscape. It is not a pristine landscape. It is a landscape that actually needs help and needs human intervention to be able to be accessed safely by the public and to have long-term ecological resilience. And so those are the two things that we're aiming to do with this project. You can move to the next slide. And so here is the design proposal that aims to protect much of the forest and slowly begin to regenerate it over time while safely adding public access to the site. All of the work that you're seeing this evening has been reviewed by the Connecticut DEEP and making sure that it is in compliance with environmental remediation standards, and all places that are open to the public, the trail systems and our 3 rooms, the eco room, the gather room, and the learn room within the forest are capped, and the public is in areas that are fully remediated. So as part of the Northern Forest design, it was really a goal to have a very light touch approach. We wanted to preserve as much of the existing canopy as possible and provide these intimate and accessible experiences through the forest for very passive activities, for families going on walks, for outdoor education opportunities, for bird watching, and for other passive forms of recreation, like maybe a small informal yoga class or a picnic. So To do that necessitates some level of infrastructural improvements. And so those are the improvements that you see before you on the screen. Circulation improvements to the vehicular circulation. So we've upgraded the entry area. Our transportation team will talk about that more directly later in the presentation. But you can see there's a new entry road and drop-off parking area of approximately 40 spaces, a modest restroom structure to enable people to use the facilities before using the space and spend longer periods of time within this 28-acre, very rich landscape. And then a path network or trail network that you see in the drawing here. The trails have different names and different scales, and I'll share that in a different diagram. But we've intentionally designed the trail system to be like lifted up out of those contaminated areas with a cap, and people are walking along trails of different scales. So there's trails designed here for families and trails designed for like smaller, more like solitary experiences. We also have 3 gathering spaces or rooms, as we call them in the landscape. A room that's really focused on ecological regeneration called the Eco Room, a passive gathering space called the Gather Room, and then a space that's more focused around outdoor immersive learning and ecological education that could really serve some of those partners that Jess mentioned, the Norwalk School System, the Norwalk Aquarium, for example, and that's called the Learn Room or Learn Pocket. In addition, we're trying to design this as a very resilient site. So our partners at eDesign later will talk about the ecological long-term management of this space and how to proactively manage the forest canopy for its long-term resilience and regenerative capabilities, and how all of the work that we're doing are removing invasive species from the site and bringing in new native species that can survive and thrive here in the long term and diversify this unique ecological system. Also, we know the site is vulnerable to flooding events, and we've designed the site with all of that in mind, trying to design a very resilient landscape, staying out of all of those very precious coastal areas that were mentioned earlier in the discussion. So this is outside of those coastal marsh landscapes, and thinking about planting new species that are more resilient to flooding events in the future and are planted at these different elevations to have more diversity within the forest system over time. You can move to the next slide. I think the only other thing I was going to mention there is we also have a secure site. Part of our safety strategy is not only about remediation, it's also about site security. So there's a perimeter security fence that secures the entire site and allows the owner to kind of control the hours and use of the space. So to speak more about the trail system, this is a kind of color-coded diagram of the trails. As we're thinking about this as a kind of standalone park day one, but then a part of a larger phased system. We are proposing constructing a portion of what we're calling the shared use trail, which is shown in the thicker kind of dark green, kind of forest green line. And that wraps up to a family trail. So this is one of our trails that's like slightly wider. This would be a trail and a loop that a family could use. Strollers can use this space. It's a kind of generous width that accommodates families and is fully ADA accessible. We have smaller trail systems shown in the kind of lighter teal colors called the Discovery Trails. These are more intimate experiences. They're narrower. They bring you into different parts of the forest. You're able to see different vegetative types. And then we also have a couple small moments of boardwalks and precast concrete plank trails, which are specifically designed to enable and maintain all of the existing drainage patterns that occur within the site. Within this project, we're trying not to disrupt the natural drainage patterns of the site. So lifted boardwalks and these precast concrete plank systems allow us to do that and allow hydrologic flows to move as they should. You can move to the next slide. To talk a bit, that's the trail network that enables people to walk through the forest. All of the trails have small like railings or small fences along the edges of them, preventing people from jumping across into the greater space. But there are these moments where people can gather and move off the trail system safely within the forest, within these remediated forest pockets that have ecological value kind of embedded in their design creation. So if you move to the next slide, the first pocket I'll be speaking to is the eco pocket or eco room. It was important for us that the largest pocket we were creating, it's about an acre in size, is really about adding habitat diversity to the site. It's a very, very passively programmed space that's purely about nature observation and outdoor learning, like experiential outdoor learning. We're introducing a large meadow and like grassland ecosystem here, which really enhances biodiversity within a forest system. And all of the, if you move to the next slide, all of the pockets, and the eco pocket is no exception. The way we've located all of the pockets within the existing forest is to kind of locate these spaces on zones of the forest that have the most invasive species pressure and are the most highly disturbed and have the least high value canopy and existing forest system on them. So these rooms are agents of ecological restoration because they allow us to remove the invasive species that have more like intensely colonize these portions of the site and add fill to be able to safely occupy these spaces. And then they're planted with a layered vegetative planting that adds biodiversity and is resilient to the unique conditions of the area. So what you're seeing in this plan in the eco room is the 1 acre meadow grassland planting. This would be a real magnet for pollinators, for birds, and other interesting animals that would use the site. It has a perimeter trail. You'll notice that there's not many public paths like through this meadow. It's really meant to be a very nature-based space. There's a perimeter trail for bird watching and outdoor education that wraps the edge. We also have small bird blind structures and like modest bench elements integrated into the plan. And the family trail moves to this space. It was very important that the family trail, the scale of trail that can accommodate strollers and slightly larger groups, would move to the different rooms to be able to have these experiences. So they're fully accessible. The meadow itself, and eDesign will speak more to this, has a really interesting micro topography. Portions move up slightly and portions move down slightly, talking inches, not even feet necessarily, to enable these unique gradients of meadow species to exist. So some more wet adaptive species, some higher elevation species, full sun, part sun. There's a real diversity of meadow species we can plant here. And this eco room would also be a great place for the project partners like the Norwalk School System to come and educate about a wide diversity of ecosystem types. Next slide. This is our planting plan from the documents that were submitted, just showing some of the species that are proposed within this landscape. Our plant list is quite extensive for the greater project, so this is just a small selection. But you can see here it is a mix of meadow species that can handle mesic meadows and dry meadows, flowering species, forbs, and also grasses are planted within this zone. And they're organized in an interesting way based upon like flower structure and color and type. So in addition to being a very rich ecological space, we think this will be a very beautiful space and will be maintained in a way that enables biological life to exist year round. Next slide. Moving on to the next room, the gather room. Again, if you move to the next slide, the way we located and thought about this space, this is a slightly smaller space than the eco room, was to locate it on top of the areas that had the most invasive species pressure. This pocket is meant to be a space that is for passive recreational gathering for the community. We're thinking about elements like hammocks, modest benches, flexible space where kids could throw a frisbee around or throw a ball around or have an informal yoga class, and a space that really could be tailored to the needs of the direct community. Next slide. This is a plan view of the gather room. It's a 0.6 acre forest pocket that features a mix of shrub and meadow plantings. We have gathering spaces with a kind of ecological lawn mix that we're proposing here that's walkable, and people can use these spaces for picnicking or general recreation. And portions of the edges are defined by a meadow that can be allowed to grow out or mown based upon the scale of event that's planned here. I'm really excited about the hammock grove component of this site, just a permanent series of hammocks that could be used to kind of first come, first serve basis for anyone who wants to take a nap and relax in the forest landscape and kind of appreciate the unique ecology of the site. Next slide. So we have a number of different species planned for this space, both canopy trees, shrubs, and this ecological lawn mix, as well as a meadow matrix. Again, we thought really carefully about coastal adaptation and flood resilience in our entire overall plant palette, and much of our plant palette is actually pulling from some of those native species that we have identified as succeeding on the site and are trying to kind of work with what's already working there and diversify it. Next slide. And then the Learn Pocket is another kind of gathering space. This one is more specifically designed around outdoor education and outdoor learning. Again, the partners of this project, the Norwalk Aquarium could come here. The Norwalk school system, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools could come here for more explicit, like structured outdoor learning events. We're trying to create outdoor classroom space as well as slightly more informal spaces around to serve like a 30-person classroom kind of scale of activity. Next slide. So this is the Learn Pocket. Again, it's located on one of these areas where we have a lot of invasive pressure and need to do a lot of invasive species management anyway. So these are all kind of taking advantage of that. It's 0.2 acres in size. It's planted ecosystem, features a mix of maritime shrubs and forest plantings. It's located close to the water and close to the one of the larger trail systems where the family trail and the shared use trail that will later expand into the greater project will connect. So it's an important kind of point of nexus and connection for the greater work, and provides these views over the water. So it provides opportunity to educate both about the forest ecosystem that you've just walked through, but also the greater Norwalk Harbor and Long Island Sound that you're looking out over. So in this drawing, you see an outdoor classroom. It's meant to be very informal. It's not a large scale amphitheater or anything like that. It's a very modest curved bench with other small benches facing the water that children can sit on and look out over the water. Very passive in nature. A small picnic grove with 4 to 5 picnic tables that enable outdoor dining so student groups can bring their lunch and actually spend more time outside. And then a kind of breakout space that we're calling the Osprey Nest, which reuses old tree logs and other elements in a kind of informal way. Next slide. So this is a space in service of outdoor learning, and we're really thinking again about coastally adapted species in this zone. And eDesign can talk specifically about the greater plant palette for the project, but we're trying to pull what's been done in the restoration planting design and feature some of those species in this learning landscape, just so there's even more abilities to kind of educate and learn. Like when you're in this learning pocket, you can look at a tree and understand that it's the same species of tree being used to restore the greater forest. Next. And so with that, I will pass it over to Nick and our partners at eDesign to talk about ecology and forest management.
Thank you, Gina. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Parisi. I'm Senior Project Manager at eDesign Dynamics, and my background is in both civil and environmental engineering, as well as landscape architecture and urban design, with a focus in climate adaptation design. And I've been designing climate resilient and coastal landscapes in the Northeast for over 8 years. Next slide, please. So to speak to the ecology and the forest management approach, as Gina has mentioned, all of the spatial locations for proposed trail networks and clearing pockets were chosen specifically to capitalize on opportunity areas for restoration. These are zones that were identified of the greatest density and prevalence of invasive species, such as autumn olive, Phragmites, and Japanese stiltgrass. These invasive species are species that, going unchecked, will take over an entire ecosystem and degrade the functions and values of that ecosystem. So the proposed interventions seek to cap the existing soil, restore native biodiversity, and act as catalysts for native recruitment of Northeast native forest species. These new trails will function as armatures of the forest restoration, setting the front lines of restoration plantings with then a gradient of buffer treatments which will adapt specifically to the trail adjacencies. These categorizations were informed by ecological assessments from our team, along with the SCAPE team, and ground truthing over the course of 2 years. The planting design intent is to establish a strong trail buffer between park patrons and the woodland interior, employing a more maximal restoration approach within the immediate trail corridor zone, and then a more targeted or surgical restoration approach in the forest buffer zones. This speaks to the point that Gina earlier mentioned about trying to preserve and enhance what is currently high value in the forest and target the species and target the areas that are currently degraded. And in order to do this, we've created 9 planting communities that were characterized based on the existing conditions of the site, historical and regional habitat priorities, and the foundations of ecology, sunlight, hydrology, and soils. Each of these communities are then assembled into a unique amalgamation planting and seeding schedule that addresses each individual zone throughout the entire forest. The restoration palette was assembled with native plant species that have the greatest range of adaptations to soil and environmental conditions to allow for the most resilient forest building blocks possible. The restoration plan emphasizes adapting to the site's microclimates and prioritizes habitat diversity while including several keystone hardy species throughout the entire North Forest area to establish site unity. Next slide, please. To understand the restoration timeline and typologies of the forest, I'll quickly describe what you're seeing here, these little vignettes that we've produced. The forest restoration, as we know, occurs on a much longer time scale. And so the restoration plan seeks to balance 3 main goals: 1, ecological uplift; 2, day 1 patron experience; and 3, construction and maintenance feasibility. The ultimate goal is to establish the foundations for this forest ecosystem to become self-organizing and self-sufficient so that it adapts to future climate scenarios. The trail corridor zones take advantage of existing clearings where sun-loving, advantageous, and non-native or invasive species thrive. So these paths are sited specifically in edge conditions or areas of similarly low value ecological function, where the design targets to catalyze the front lines of restoration. The planting design here focuses on smaller, younger plant material, which is more adaptive and can withstand a wider range of environmental conditions, and this provides the greatest chance of establishment success. Then in the areas known as buffers, these typologies were developed to address areas which include specimens of existing high value or native species to remain, where there's no need to clear cut or start from scratch. The goal here is to preserve all of the good species, all of the high value species, and target areas that require improvement. So here we're focusing on areas of denser non-native or invasive species via physical removal and replacement. Our selective interventions in these areas will then set the foundation and the building blocks for nature itself to adapt and address future climate issues on its own, while minimizing any negative impacts to the existing forest structure associated with the site preparation and construction. I will now pass it along to Taigen Bond to speak to traffic.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. For the record, my name is Andrew White with Taigen Bond. I'm a professional engineer registered in the state of Connecticut with 19 years of experience in land development. This portion of the presentation is going to focus on the proposed driveway, parking, grading, stormwater management, site infrastructure improvements that are associated with the Northern Forest. Here we go. This slide shows an overall presentation of the Northern Forest with the driveway coming in off of Longshore Avenue, utilizing the existing site driveway that exists today. The internal circulation is designed for low-speed operation to prioritize pedestrian safety, buses, and service vehicles. Parking is consolidated into one defined area adjacent to the driveway, minimizes site disturbance, limits clearing, and preserve surrounding forest areas. A guard booth is provided at the entrance of the driveway to manage site access. Immediately inside the entrance, there is space for bus stop and vehicle turnaround back onto Longshore. The existing Eversource substation access is maintained and separated from the North Forest driveway as shown in this figure. The separation provides gated maintenance access for the required utility operations. The project provides a total of 40 parking spaces, including 2 van accessible ADA spaces that meet all the accessibility requirements. In addition, there are 2 designated bus loading spaces. A comfort station that was previously talked about, the restrooms, is going to be provided east of the parking lot, more in the southeastern corner, just south of the trail, the southernmost trail that's on the screen. ADA compliant sidewalks are provided along the east side of the driveway and parking lot from Longshore Avenue southerly down to this comfort station. All walkways along the parking area and access drive meet ADA slopes and requirements, and pedestrian connections are provided from these sidewalks to the Northern Forest trails that were discussed previously.
Excuse me, Mr. White.
Yes.
Can you explain why you're proposing portable bathrooms as opposed to full built bathrooms that are tied into the city system?
So we're still exploring the bathroom facilities. The idea for these facilities was for the goal of for the goal of ecological preservation and self-sustainability and resiliency on the island, to have its own treatment system, if you would. So these have been looked at for providing on-site septic to handle these bathrooms and not burden the existing municipal infrastructure. And this would set up at least the first phase to have these bathrooms ready. And then as the future development comes in, which would be under separate permits and drawings in front of this commission, to see whether or not that would be continued to another wastewater treatment facility that is on this site or tied into the municipal system. But that's further down the line. So this is trying to have a sustainable, self-reliant system in this portion of the project.
Thank you.
Mr. White, another question for you on the prior slide. I'm curious, you had brought up the access road for Eversource and their easement.
Yes.
One question I had as I was reviewing this application was about the 2 driveways here that seem to be running in parallel. I'm curious why there's a new driveway proposed as opposed to using the existing driveway and connecting it into the parking lot further down where the parking lot is placed.
In the future phases of the plan, the plan is to use the new site driveway that is created now as the site access for the rest of the project, and then to convert the existing substation driveway into a future multimodal trail as part of the trail network. So for the current, so that's future looking. For the current operations, we would want a separation of the utility traffic that is needed for the substation, as well as future construction, since we want to manage future phases of this project and not be inundating this road as it's open to the public. So by having the 2 driveways, we'll be able to bifurcate the construction and user traffic for future phases that'll be ongoing on the site.
Thank you.
All right. Jumping ahead to site grading and soil erosion control. As we're talking about this driveway coming down off of Longshore, the site grading strategy for this site, the drive gradually increases a 2% slope from Longshore up to elevation 11.5 to align with the city's Resilient South Norwalk initiative. The parking area that the driveway connects to ranges from elevation 12 to 15, with the 15 elevation being in the southeast east corner of the parking lot where the comfort station is located. This design provides 2 feet of freeboard above the base flood elevation of the base flood elevation of 13 for the comfort station, meeting city requirements. During construction, soil erosion and sedimentation controls will be utilized around the property, including siltation fence, straw wattles, and stabilized construction entrances. These temporary measures will remain in place until this portion of the site is fully stabilized, after which the permanent stabilization will be provided by the established site landscaping. As mentioned previously in Gina's presentation, existing hydraulic patterns are to be maintained across the site to the extent practicable. The existing low point that's located just south of Longshore Avenue will continue to function as an on-site infiltration area, preserving natural drainage behaviors. And this is also a section of the site that is not going to be disturbed by excavation. Culverts beneath the driveway provide hydraulic connectivity, ensuring that stormwater can move freely across the site without creating impoundment or adverse impacts. Also shown on this plan are some of this utilities. So electrical service for both the guard booth and driveway lighting is provided from existing overhead services. As you'll see on the next slide, the existing electrical services the proposed electrical services continue south along the site driveway for the remainder of the driveway lights, the parking lights, and the comfort station. And additionally, water service will be provided to the comfort station, and electrical service supports both the site drive and parking areas. The project utilizes a treatment train approach to collect and treat the stormwater. The design implements several low-impact development techniques and best management practices, such as permeable pavement, bioretention swales, and hydrodynamic separators. The parking lot utilizes permeable pavement within the parking stalls to filter stormwater into stone reservoirs. Similarly, the on-site driveway is directed to bioretention basin to filter stormwater. Due to the presence of impacted soils, these filtration practices will be lined with impermeable liners to limit stormwater infiltration. Stormwater from these systems, as well as the proposed culverts, will discharge to grade after passing through hydrodynamic separators to further treat the stormwater. The design does not increase peak runoff flow or volume to any downstream properties or public rights-of-way. The project does, however, result in a limited increase in runoff peak flow and volume to south to Long Island Sound. As mentioned a moment ago, with the presence of impacted soils on the site, the need for impermeable liners, it is not feasible to fully retain and infiltrate the stormwater due to 2 pre-development levels. Due to the site being located in a coastal area immediately adjacent to Long Island Sound, the minor increase in runoff is negligible and will not cause adverse impacts to adjacent water bodies. This approach is consistent with section 1.4.3 of the City of Norwalk 2017 Drainage Manual, which allows for exemption of coastal sites. The proposed design improves drainage at the site driveway entrance off of Longshore Avenue, as there is a reduction in peak flow and volume to Longshore Avenue in the proposed condition compared to the existing condition. And just to provide a little additional clarity, we do have a typical section that's cut through the parking lot itself, the road driveway, and the bioretention swale. And this is showing the relationship between all of these systems itself. Also, that the elevated driveway and parking area, by elevating these, allows us to provide the depth required for these filtration medias and still be able to pick them up and discharge them south to achieve low impact development features. Site lighting and layout. The proposed lighting is limited to the driveway, the bus stop turnaround, and parking areas. The proposed fixtures are full cutoff, dark sky compliant to control glare, prevent light spill into adjacent natural areas. The pole heights have been selected to balance user safety with minimal visual impact. with layout and spacing to meet the Norwalk zoning criteria. The criteria are minimum of 1 foot candle in parking areas, maximum of 1 foot candle at frontage line, and no other light spill off the property. A maximum height of 30 feet in non-residential areas. And we do note that the new fixtures are proposed to be mounted at 24 feet, and the existing features or existing pole features along the Eversource easement are 28 feet above grade. The area highlighted in yellow depicts the extents of the calculated foot candle levels down to 0.1 foot candle. As shown, there is minimum spread of light beyond the existing access drive, which is highlighted in orange on this plan. The lighting design meets functional needs while remaining sensitive to the surrounding environment. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Chris Granatini for traffic conclusions.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, commissioners. For the record, my name is Christopher Granatini. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut, and I'm a vice president with Ty & Bond, located at 213 Court Street in Middletown, Connecticut. My work throughout my 30-year career has been predominantly focused on transportation and traffic engineering projects, including safety projects, traffic studies, transportation planning, and roadway design. Let's go to the next slide. So tonight during my presentation, I will explain the traffic engineering and parking analyses that we conducted associated with the Northern Forest project. I'll explain how the sites are anticipated to generate traffic and the parking demand and supply on the site. And then in response to questions that we received from the commission and staff in TMP, we'll also present the construction phase traffic assessment that was also conducted. And I'll just note that, as we noted earlier in the presentation, earlier today we received the sign-off from TMP on the 2 reports that we submitted. And just a little bit of background, throughout the process of developing our reports for this project, we were having consistent dialogue with city staff to ensure that the work we were doing was in alignment with the needs of the city and that department to explain how this project would develop and the potential impacts associated with it. So next slide. So just to look at how the Northern Forest project will operate from a traffic perspective, as we look at this development park, we look to ITE, the Trip Generation Manual, as the kind of document that guides us in determining how much new traffic a site might generate post-development. And so looking through that document, we've selected a land use code 411 that is for public parks. And we utilized the park acreage as the variable to determine how many trips we would anticipate this site generating on a daily basis. And the manual also provides us with the means to distribute that traffic throughout the course of the day. And so the table on the slide provides the breakdown for how these 104 total daily vehicle trips, which are calculated for this site, would be distributed across a normal day at Manresa Wilds and the Northern Forest. And so we're forecasting 104 total daily vehicle trips. And we anticipate, based on the distribution, that peak would occur during the middle of the day. And we note that middle of the day peak for the park is not in conflict with the normal commuter peaks, which occur generally between 7 and 9 in the morning and 4 and 6 in the afternoon. In addition to the traffic that we've estimated, we also note that this site will be served by Norwalk Transit. And as Andrew talked about, there's accommodations made, under this plan to provide a bus pickup and drop-off point at the entrance to the site. with some amenities there for folks that want to ride the transit down here. We will continue to have dialogues with the Norwalk Transit District and TMP on that topic. And I believe under, in future development programs, and as we continue to look at the site in the future, additional accommodations will be made on site to even further accommodate transit use on the site. And so as we look at what the site will generate, in that 104 trips, we did want to also note that we took a conservative look at this and said, well, what if the site, actually generates twice as much traffic as we think it might? And that's still only forecasting, about 208 trips a day with a peak of about 28 trips during that midday peak on the roadway network. And so as we look at the site, the estimated North Forest project traffic during the peak hours is less than a 4% increase over actual traffic volumes on the roadway network. So we're talking about Woodward Avenue and points to the north, and then the daily traffic, the total daily traffic generated by this site, the 104 trips, is less than a 2% increase over the daily traffic that is currently utilizing Woodward Avenue just upstream of the site. Next slide.
Mr. Granatini, on this slide really quick, the trip generation table here, does the ITE manual specify a day of the week that is representative of the 104 or the 208 trips?
So this is, as we looked at the manual and we're trying to figure out, which day is peak relative to the adjacent roadway network. And we have started a data collection program in South Norwalk to understand how traffic conditions will exist on the roadway network. This is a typical weekday because in the manual, that was the distribution that we showed here was available for a weekday. And so as we looked at a potential weekend, that was sort of why we looked at this double a weekday type of distribution also, to kind of see what if the site was twice as busy on a weekend as it is during the week. At the same time, the roadway system around the park is less busy on a weekend, and so even if the park is a little bit more busy on the weekend, the traffic that's around the park is much lower volumes on the weekend than during the weekday. So it sort of balances itself in that regard when we look at the actual impacts of the site.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask what happens if additional cars come and all 40 of the parking spaces are being used?
So can I just quickly present how we generated the parking assessment, and then I'll answer your question?
Sure.
Let me just write that down. Okay, so as we transition from traffic generation to parking demand on the site, we took the assessment of there's kind of two methodologies that we used. We looked at the trip generation, and this is where we looked at the ITE trip generation, and then we looked at the ITE trip generation times 2 for the weekday, because that's where that data was available for public parks. And then we looked at the weekend from the ITE parking generation manual. So it's a different publication, but similar, from ITE, that essentially tells us how sites generate parking demand. And so the table on the slide shows that during the weekday, even with double the actual trip generation that we forecast, the site would only have a parking demand of about 28 peak parked cars. And the way that we assessed that was we looked at the actual hourly trip generation, and then we calculated a 2-hour kind of stay at the park before you would leave again. And so we just accumulated the traffic on the site in the parking lot over that 2-hour period. So as cars would come, they would stay for 2 hours and leave the site while other cars were coming. And that's essentially how we calculated the first two columns on the table, which gave us a peak demand of 28 parked cars on the weekday. And then as we looked at the weekend for the ITE parking generation, that's when that manual provided data that we could use for our report. As you'll see here, we are showing a peak demand in that kind of 1 to 3 time frame of just over the 40 spaces that are marked on the site. What this doesn't take into effect is the fact that the site is accessible by transit. That's not factored into it. It's you can walk to the site. It has a sidewalk that connects to Longshore and would allow you to walk into the site and use it in that regard. So as we looked at the weekday peak demand and the weekend peak demand, and the value of trying to limit the actual disturbance of the site, for a parking facility, we felt as though a 40-space parking lot was the right number to accommodate the parking demand. The site will also have 24/7 on-site security and management. And so if the parking is unavailable, Manresa Wilds will have the ability to basically turn people away from the site to control and manage parking on the site. So it's partly parking management, and it's partly our estimates of what the site will generate for parking demand.
But
Commissioner
but
Schulman,
frankly, given the surrounding surrounding area, should a car or several cars be turned away, they're going to be looking at parking the closest possible areas, including Village Creek, where there really is no on-street parking, or parking on the access road itself. I don't live in the area, but if I did, I would be concerned about that.
Commissioner Schulman, it's Doug Adams with the applicant. The site, I understand we've looked at this concern. We control a lot of the space along Longshore, and our security would then be able to make sure that no one parks along that area. And the parking area is designed so people can turn and then leave and go back to South Norwalk without having to go down into the neighborhood beyond Harbor Creek or other things. So we feel we're trying to do everything we can that if people come to our site and there is no parking there, that we'll be able to direct them to go back downtown and find an alternative, whether it's an Uber or a bus or some other method, or come back at another time.
It seems like they'd most likely just park on Yost or Sable, which has already got a lot of overflow parking coming from people playing pickleball, myself included. I am concerned about this as
Where are the security personnel and other personnel going to park?
I can answer that. Chris Murphy, Chief of Design and Construction. The security and operational staff for this Phase 1 North Forest will park on the interior remainder of the site. Further south of it, we have the existing parking lot adjacent to the power plant structure that will be reserved for operations staff. So the 40 spots available for North Forest parking is sized and available to the visitors that we're expecting.
Thank you.
It's Jess Vonashek here. I did want to mention as well that one of the things that we've been talking about internally to the team is the importance of being able to operate the Northern Forest in a way that showcases that we are a good neighbor. And one of the things that we have been exploring is the ability to adopt a reservation system for the parking. And so that's something that we've talked about in a lot of the neighborhood community meetings, where we've said, we understand that there is a concern about cars traveling into some of the neighborhoods like Village Creek and Harborview. And as Doug said, that's why we've adopted not only for that only reason, but we've adopted that roundabout at the gate of the property in order to be able to allow people to turn around. But I think the crux of it is being able to not have the cars travel to the site if we do not have the parking in order to be able to accommodate them. And that's where the reservation system comes in, and the ability to understand if there's a high demand on the weekends or high demand at certain times during the day, that we are able to put a system in place that tells people if parking is available or it is not. Now, will that stop everyone from coming to the site? No. Obviously, people will probably still try to get to the site, but at that point in time, we would have the security on site in order to be able to turn people back from the park. I do also want to mention that one of the things that we've explored with this park is looking at this park in comparison with other parks that are around the city of Norwalk. And one thing that we do recognize is that there are other parks in the city of Norwalk with trail systems, and there are other parks in the city that have access to water views as well. And so while we imagine that there'll be a higher demand when we first open the Northern Forest in order for people to be curious, cure their curiosity and be able to see what the park is all about. We imagine visitation will be high, just like in any park when it first opens, but that as we normalize that visitation, that we'll see different parking patterns as we move through the evolution of the site. And so I just wanted to note those few things that we've been talking about from an internal standpoint that relate to operations.
Oh, that's really clever on the parking reservation. And then also just going to add, your last point resonates a lot to me about it'll naturalize over time. Like, I've never been to Cranberry, not been able to find a parking spot, and there's tons of trails and whatnot there. And so I think, there'll be a little blip, but also when people go to Cranberry and they can't find a spot, you don't see people loading up on the road or the side roads there. So I see them very similar comparisons.
Yeah, thank you. Just another note, just really quickly. We've been talking a lot to different parks around the country and what they've experienced and what they haven't experienced. And one of the things that we've been kind of warned about is to say, to your point, Commissioner Cantor, that you'll see sort of this higher visitation a little bit early, and then it does sort of naturalize and it does come down. And one of the things that we've been talking about is sort of how do you manage that, the curiosity moment where we open, and then how do you sort of roll that down? A lot of parks in the country have actually gone and increased parking, or they've taken trees down in order to be able to increase a parking lot in order to be able to accommodate more people, when only then a couple months later they end up having parking lots that are only 25 and 30% full because they've actually then hit their naturalized kind of visitation. So we've been taking cues from other parks in order to be able to think about how parking is utilized on the site.
Well, I think your idea about using a reservation system makes a lot of sense, especially for the early days when you may have more visitors than you can park. If people know up front that they have to have a reservation, you can ease off on that once you're past that honeymoon phase. But it would help you to avoid problems early on with people going there, not being able to find a spot and parking in one of the neighborhoods.
Do you know how many parking spots Cranberry has in that lot for the trails?
Let me just look and see. We did a park comparison. So let me just pull it up and answer.
Unfortunately, Cranberry is so large, over 200 acres, has very different, it's got wedding venue, it's got a whole bunch of varieties. So the parking, they just have multiple lots spread throughout the park. So it's not quite an apples to apples.
Right. But I mean, and you may not have this, but just the main parking lot by where the playground and the entrance to the trail is, like on a random day, random Saturday, those of us who use that parking lot have seen how full it gets. It's usually not hard to find a space,
Yep.
but it's also like halfway full maybe. And I'm just curious how many spots they have there for comparison.
Yeah.
I think one good comparison is Oyster Shell Park. So the total park is 15 acres and they have a total of 25 parking spaces that go down to 12 parking spaces during special events. And then another for, of course, Calf Pasture Beach, which is 35 acres, but is a very, very different sort of park system. But they have in the upwards of almost 500 parking spots. And then again,
Oak Hills is a different one. I mean, it has a golf
Oak
course.
Hills has a golf course, yeah. But I think for Oyster Shell with the 15 acres is the 25 parking spaces.
I think, Jess, is it worth mentioning that beyond the 40 parking spots in the North Forest lot, we are planning for the 2 bus pullover loading parking spots to really focus and lean into the educational component of getting the local school systems to the site to use the eco and learn pockets. So we're really focusing on multimodal opportunities here with the bus parking on site, bike parking at the trailhead, and then the bus Norwalk route loop at the entrance. So really trying to get people to the site in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, they're good points, Chris. And I just one last point for you to think about. One of the things that we've been doing is identifying all of the groups in Norwalk and beyond, not only for those educational partnerships that we've talked about, but we've met with the Norwalk Transit District that will be adopting that bus stop on Route B, which is the new incremental stop. And what that means is that the Norwalk Transit District bus will no longer be doing a 3-point turn at Dock Road and Woodward Avenue. They'll be actually using our site as a turnaround at the roundabout. But in addition to that, we also connected with the Norwalk school system, and they will no longer be doing a 3-point turn at Dock Road and Woodward anymore either. They'll actually be using our roundabout. So right now, that's what's happening in that intersection. But I mentioned that because in addition to the conversations about the Route B incremental Manresa Wilds bus stop that would stop right there at the gate, we've also talked to the transit district about an opportunity to be able to adopt a circulator during the summer months, the seasonal months, where we could actually take people from potentially Sono Collection to the Maritime Aquarium to Children's Museum to East Norwalk train station, South Norwalk train station, and being able to actually run a circulator that would actually use that roundabout as well and that bus layover as well. And so, we've been identifying the partners locally, but also understanding sort of things that have been talked around about in the city for a long time, like a seasonal circulator, and understanding how Manresa Wilds can really lift that opportunity up for not only the site, but also the community as a whole. And, in saying that, we've been in conversations with Sono Collection as well about identifying additional overflow parking that's possible. And so from an operational standpoint, again, we've been exploring all of these pieces internally.
I appreciate looking to see how else folks can reach the site and the circulator. As a comment on Cranberry Park, I believe it's got to be at least 100 spaces, although I do not have a count, but just from visiting. A question for the applicant. I'm glad to see the bus loading zones on the site to encourage that connection with schools and other groups that may be interested in visiting. On days where buses are not scheduled to come in, could those spots be repurposed into parking, especially during that honeymoon phase, and adding cones in order to provide some supplemental parking?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we were thinking. So basically, the configuration of those spots is basically parallel to the sidewalk. And so to your point, we would be able to add in perpendicular parking spaces in those 2 areas. And so we'll be bringing somebody on from an operational standpoint to help us oversee the actual operation of the park itself and the programming of the park, obviously with building out a learning room with 30 seated area that looks out on the water. We're going to want to be able to utilize that, especially during the week for school programs. And so to your point, in the evenings as well as on the weekends, we have the ability to repurpose those particular spaces in order to be able to create more.
And
And just
Chair, I
just-
think Ty and Bond can confirm it's probably an additional 14 spaces if there's no buses there.
Correct.
That anticipated my next question. Yeah.
Yep, the two bus parking spaces essentially
I have a question.
provide 14 additional
spaces.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, JJ.
Hi, I have a question for Jessica. You said that a circulator. What is that? Is it like a trolley system, or like that goes from point to point and it's free access for passengers?
Yeah, so it's so the transparent answer right now is I'm not sure. That is the transparent answer right now. But what we've been talking about is identifying parking spaces that may be available off-site, and then understanding how to actually get people from those off-site parking spaces to the actual site. And not only for the Northern Forest, but thinking about the larger park and putting those kind of stepping stones in place and those sort of foundations in place to be able to explore these conversations. So what we've been talking about with the Norwalk Transit District is the ability to take one of the buses that they have right now and be able to run a circulator, as in like the same loop over and over and over again, where people have the ability to say, oh, if there's if the parking is full at Manresa Wilds, we have the ability to park somewhere else, and that circulator is coming in 3.5 minutes and can get us to the site in X minutes. So, but what we think is that from an economic development standpoint, it has the ability to lift up a number of different organizations and institutions in the city of Norwalk. And so, instead of it just coming from a train station to Manresa, we have the ability to work with all of these different partners in order to be able to bring them into this circulator loop to say you could spend your morning at the Maritime Aquarium and you can spend your afternoon at the Northern Forest if you chose to do that. So again, these are all things that we're exploring, but I just want to make it clear that from an operational standpoint, they're conversations that we are excited to have, knowing not only that there'll be visitors to the park, but also, again, based on those values and guiding principles that we're trying to lift the site up for many to be able to get here. And so trying to understand how to support that is part of this project.
Thank you.
Tammy, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chapin.
Mhm.
JJ asked a little bit of it. I know we're only supposed to focus on the North Forest here this evening, but I think if the team has the ability to say for future development down where the power plant is now, what sort of parking is going to be there, and will people be able to come in and go to both spaces? So you park it by the forest and walk down to the other space, or do you anticipate the distance is more than most people want to walk? Just kind of looking into the future a little bit with that.
Yeah, I think a couple comments. One, when you look at the Northern Forest, you can even see at the Learning Pocket, there's sort of the family trail is kind of cut off, and so there will be an actual trail that goes all the way around the site in order to be able to help people get from one side of the site to the other, on foot or by bike. The other piece that we wanted to kind of mention is that there are connections and will be connections for the community to be able to travel from the Northern Forest into the other piece. I think at this particular point in time, we still need to work through the concept plan event on February the 19th, and then come to you in a separate meeting through a separate application process to talk about a district. And so the zoning and the parking will lie hand in hand for a totally different application at a different time. And we're happy to talk about that when that application comes through. But I think that those pieces will be married to one another when we talk about the district and what the parking is required to support that. And so, but what I can say is that there are definitely connectors between the two pieces, and that while we're bringing the Northern Forest forward today to you, in order for you to be able to understand what we're asking for today, we have talked about future phases of the park supporting one another, and that it's not just the Northern Forest, that the Northern Forest needs to work in a harmonious way with the rest of the site, and that's really important from a connectivity standpoint.
Thank you. If I can ask another question, but it's not related to parking. Jessica, you showed at the beginning of your presentation an old aerial photo that made the property look like there were many sort of bodies of water that were part of an estuary or marshland. Have you all in your exploration of the property noticed, is it sinking at all? Is it, changing? If it once was, more water than it then became with all of the coal ash in the forest area?
Yeah, it's a great question. We haven't seen any sinking. And as a matter of fact, we've had AKRF out, which is the remediation team, in order to be able to understand the different levels of contamination and where they exist and how. And we've worked so closely with DEEP. We meet with DEEP a couple times a month, twice a month, in order to be able to talk about what this site looks like and where those deposits are and how they've changed over time or have not changed over time. And I think that what we've seen is a couple things. One is that the 90-acre birch forest has really solidified some of the coal ash to a certain extent on the northern portion, not speaking of the other portions. But we've had teams out even from Wesleyan University to do core samples to be able to sort of showcase that. And one thing, we actually have Ms. Ford online, Michelle, who is our wetland expert, who met with us when we went to the Conservation Commission a few weeks ago. And, one of the things that we identified were wetlands are really based on hydrology and vegetation and soil, and that what is coming out of those wetlands really isn't even soil, it's actually coal ash. And so I think, Tammy, it's just years and years and years of basically just pushing down the coal ash, and it's just become compact over time. And now we have 102 acres of this coal ash that needs to be dealt with.
Thank you.
Can I just wrap up the construction traffic
do.
portion of the presentation? So just transitioning from the post-development phase to an assessment that we conducted at the request of TMP to provide them with the details of how the actual construction of the Northern Forest would take place with respect to construction traffic, both truck traffic and construction worker traffic. And so some of the kind of metrics, we envision that the project will get developed over the course of about 11 months of total construction. On an average day, we're forecasting approximately 10 to 20 passenger vehicle trips to the site. That's the construction workers coming to and from work in the morning between 8:30 and 6:30 and 8, and departing between 3:30 and 5. And those are just passenger vehicles. And then, associated with the actual construction activities on the site, we took a very detailed look at the different portions of construction. And so you've heard a lot today about remediation and, the landscaping and the construction of the trails. And so as we worked through, what's the right way to manage construction on the site, we've essentially established about a 4 truck per hour delivery sequence for the first 7 months of the project. And so, on an average day, you would see anywhere from 32 to 40 trucks actually servicing the site over the course of each workday, bringing in materials, hauling out materials, and the such. And so in working with the city, as you probably are all very aware, South Norwalk has some limitations on how trucks can access areas within the railroad corridor. And so as we talked with the city staff and TMP, we've got regional access from 95 and Route 7. As you get down to the local roadway network, the primary route would be truck traffic coming in West Avenue, following MLK Drive to its southern intersection with Wilson Avenue, and then traversing up Meadow Street, and then from Meadow Street coming back down Woodward Avenue into the site. The city informed us of some construction projects that they have on the docket for 2026, And so they've asked us to also identify a secondary route that also follows West Avenue and MLK Drive. But under certain periods, we would also use Monroe Street and then South Main Street to access Woodward Avenue to access the site. And so those two access routes were intended to keep truck traffic on the primary travel routes away from the residential roadways. And those were the two routes that the city staff essentially directed us to utilize. And those are also the routes that the Walk Bridge project is also following to get construction materials onto and off of Manresa Island, which they're also doing. And so with that, next slide, Andrew, I think that wraps up my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Granatini, on the construction vehicle routes and timing, how is that communicated and enforced with contractors who may be doing these deliveries?
Yeah, so working with the folks at Manresa, there will be contractual requirements put into the kind of bid documents that the contractors will agree to that will dictate these haul routes into and out of the site. I mean, generally the haul routes, there are limitations of how to get into and out of South Norwalk in general, so there aren't that many options, but those routes will be defined in the contract documents that the contractors will be signing, and they'll be monitored also.
A question either for you or maybe someone else on the applicant team is this site is unique in the fact that it could accept barge material. Was barge material evaluated for this site as a delivery mechanism?
Yeah, I can take that. Chris Murphy, Chief of Design and Construction with the MIC applicant team. So we did explore barge for this phase. It is highly complicated by the marina berth on our site currently within the DOT Walk Bridge easement, supporting the construction of the Walk Bridge. So they're doing truss bridge assembly and barging currently out of the berth. And so we did work with them. It's very complicated for this first phase with the overlap of their activities. For the later phases of the park master planning development, we are absolutely going to be exploring heavily the opportunity to barge in import material. It aligns with our goals as a project and being a good neighbor. So we're absolutely committed to exploring it. The quantities for this phase 1 North Forest, I know they sound high, but for the infrastructure to set up a barging transport, unloading, offloading, and then transferring it from the south end of the site up to the north, it just was a less feasible opportunity for this phase. So we did explore it, but we're going to be using trucking for this first phase.
Thank you.
Do any of the commissioners or staff have any questions of us at this time? Because that does conclude our presentation to you. If any questions, we're happy to answer them. We'll look forward to hearing from the public, but should you have anything now or during the public, certainly please ask and we'll do our best to respond. Okay, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. One question I did have, or maybe more as a comment, I did note that the parking lot does not have a designation for any electric vehicle spaces, and I believe 2 are required given that there's 40 spaces. So I just wanted to highlight that as an item to adjust in the site plan.
Noted. Thank you.
Noted. Yes. Thank you.
Yep. Great. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right. Hearing none, we will move to the public hearing after we take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back at 7:50 and then we will move to public comment. All right, we will now resume the hearing for this application. During the break, I was reviewing the neighborhood comments, and I'm sure folks will raise it tonight, but wanted to ask a question before we go to the public comment, which was about the lighting in the parking lot and along the driveway. Some residents had raised concerns about the height and how the light might be visible from those light poles that are for the parking lot and driveway. Is there any mitigations that can be put in place, maybe shielding along the light fixtures in order to address that concern?
Chris Murphy, do you want to take that for our team?
You're on mute, Chris.
Hey, team. Thank you. Time Bond actually selected the fixtures very specifically to have adequate pointed down lighting and reduce and eliminate light pollution beyond the direct adjacencies of the roadway. So that was one of the presentation slides we showed, actually had the photometric illumination down lights along the access road, showing that it did not, continue out to the west. We are planning on planting in between the existing access road and our new roadway into the parking lot. So there is planting along that transition berm. And then in the later phases, when we come back to take out that existing access road and continue the new one all the way into the interior of the site, we will also be putting in a new trail system and additional planting there. So I believe we're being extremely thoughtful about the light placement, fixture selection, dark sky requirements, as well as, yes, there's planting in this phase as well as future planting contemplated.
Great. Are there any other questions before we go to the public comment? All right, hearing none. So we will now move to the public comment. This is an opportunity for you to speak. Unfortunately, there's only one opportunity for you to speak tonight, but there is no limit on how long you may speak. But we do ask you to be concise. This ensures that your points are clear and others also have their opportunity to speak. This portion is not a dialogue, but the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to all of the comments at the end. As a reminder, this is an application for the North Forest and is not about the future development that may happen on the site that is not proposed at this time. We greatly appreciate the letters that were sent in as public comment, as it provided us time and the applicant time to read your feedback and integrate it into this project. So we ask that you not read your letters tonight and instead focus on new comments about this application. With that, we ask that you are, of course, polite in your comments and that you start with your full name and address. Brian, do you mind sharing how folks can comment on this application?
Sure. So any folks from the public, if you'd like to speak, you can use the raise your hand tool. It's located at the bottom of your screen. You would click that once. And if you're dialed in on a phone, you can hit *9. With that, we'll bring over David McCarthy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. My name is David McCarthy, and I reside at 35 Fox Run Road in Norwalk. Good evening. Sorry, I literally just finished eating dinner. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in favor of the Manresa Wilds special permit application. I'm speaking tonight as a resident of Norwalk for 42 years, but I'm also a business owner in Norwalk, and I have a master's degree in city and regional planning. I am in favor of approving the special permit application to enable the North Forest project because it represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a waterfront public space in Norwalk. The North Forest phase will provide over 28 acres of preserved natural land that will greatly benefit Norwalkers by providing a new recreational space for hiking, walking, meditation, education, and other such activities. This space will improve our quality of life, and it will not come at a cost to our taxpayers. When I was a child, my family had a sailboat, which we moored just off of Manresa Island, and we often sailed around Norwalk Harbor. During those trips, I was always curious about the Manresa Island property, both because of its imposing power plant and its extensive fenced-off acreage. I imagined it as some kind of a lost world that I would sneak into someday to explore. I had heard that Norwalk had an opportunity to buy the Manresa Island property to create a public park in the 1950s and didn't, which seemed like such a mistake. We now have the good fortune to have a second bite at the apple, which doesn't come along very often, except this time we don't even need to pay for it. Let's choose today to have a park at this incredible site so that future generations can explore it and access it and enjoy the amazing scenery that you can see from this incredible site. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, it's Cherner Studio, excuse me.
Hello, yes, it's Ben Cherner here at 3 Outer Road. I'm a licensed architect in Connecticut and New York City, and I'd like to get a little more specific in terms of some of the issues that we're concerned about here in Village Creek. Really 3 issues. One, I still didn't understand why the parking area and access road would be elevated to elevation 15. The only thing I could get from the presentation was that's to elevate the bathroom, the restrooms. And I know that that's not typical of other facilities. I know Compo doesn't have their restrooms elevated. I'm not sure about Calf Pasture, but you know, we're talking about thousands of truckloads of fill to raise this whole area, you know, the access road and the parking, which exposes it not only to the wildlife, but also to Village Creek. And for 60 years, we have public roads with no streetlights. It's a, you know, probably, you know, certainly a dark sky environment. But I also took the time this morning to measure how far we were from this access road and raised access road and parking area. And we're 900 feet away. And that's a third of the residents of Village Creek. That's pretty close proximity. And I know that, well, first of all, let me say that the proposal for the trails and the eco room and learning room and gathering room is just incredible. Nobody could be against that. It's just so beautiful and so well done. And there was I think a bit of a disconnect between the SCAPE presentation and then the T and Bond presentation. And it's a little odd because, you know, the parking area and access road was a little bit like the elephant in the room. As an architect, I had, you know, could see the set of drawings that were submitted for the approvals. Very comprehensive set of drawings. And there were no sections through the parking area or the access road. There were sections and details through the trails, through all kinds of elements in the, you know, the nature area, but no description showing the lighting, you know, the height of the access road, the steep berms. And to have the parking area and access road pushed as close to Village Creek as possible, that to me is not a good neighbor policy. And you know, if you look at the drawings that were submitted, and that's all I really had to go with, there were no trees along the new access road. That was all ground cover. So all of that traffic, all of the cars, all of the lighting, well, 900 feet away from Village Creek, that seems not like a good neighbor policy. And so that good neighbor policy was a dense planting buffer. Let's see if I can, let's see. Activities will be screened by dense buffers of planting, and the main entry road will be pulled deeper into the forest to minimize disturbance from traffic. That's from the Manresa Wilds Good Neighbor slide. And the access road and parking area is not being pulled the slightest into the forested area, and no attempt to buffer it with any kind of dense planting to the west. And in fact, it's a berm that goes essentially from elevation 15, 14, 13 down to 6. That to me, that doesn't really work. And the other is the lighting, and you have to go by the drawings. And I submitted again a screenshot from the set that was submitted. It's a size 2 Viper area site strike fixture mounted 27 feet high, supplied by Beacon. And their description is for lighting applications such as auto dealership, retail, commercial, and campus parking lots. And again, this can be revisited, but this is what was submitted to the board and the public to review. And you know, that doesn't strike me as good neighbor policy. And I know that the Manresa Association has been in contact with Manresa Wilds, and just recently they've agreed to move the multimodal trail away from Longshore Avenue and lower it. And this was an area where they were concerned about even driving by a multimodal trail. This isn't even car movement. This is people or golf carts, I suppose, or bicycles. Now we're talking about an access road to the northern forest, which will be continued to the buildings eventually, which will have a significant volume of traffic, 900 feet away from Village Creek, with as far as I can tell, a planting buffer that's, I'm looking at the design, maybe the width of the proposed access road, and then it drops down to the existing road at elevation 8. So we've got a steeply sloping berm down to the existing road, and that's a dense buffer. It just seems like it wouldn't take much to push this a little bit over and really create a buffer to the wildlife and respect the community of Village Creek. We've been here 60 years. You know, we're, again, 900 feet away from this. So I'd like, you know, to take a look at that. And I know these adjustments are being made. Obviously, the lighting as submitted is not appropriate. So, and I assume that that will be resubmitted. And I think we have to take a look at, again, raising this up so high, up to elevation 15. I mean, Sustainable South Norwalk, they're recommending raising Woodward, Concord to a couple of feet. That would place it at elevation 9, not elevation 15. So you're at the high point, you're at the bathrooms, you're at elevation 15, you're dropping back down to Longshore Avenue at elevation 7.5. What is the point of bringing thousands of truckloads of fill to raise this area, to expose it to the wildlife and to our community? Thank you very much. I know it's late. Sorry if I went on a bit. I appreciate it. Thank you to the commission.
Next, we have Mark Smith.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking my call, and thanks for allowing me a moment to speak. Just wanted to address a few points. I live at 7 Outer Road, directly next to Ben Turner, who just spoke. My piece of land is directly adjacent, directly across the marsh from Manresa Island. Just want to address one of the first comments that was made on public land and allowing access to Manresa Island. This is not public land; it's still owned privately, and it will be at the discretion of the owners on when and how they want to allow access. The marketing around that terminology is misleading at best. Moving on to the role of the commission under Norwalk regulations. Under Norwalk's zoning regulations and the city's plan of POCD, this commission's responsibility is to evaluate specific land use impacts, regulatory compliance, and enforceable conditions. What has been presented relies heavily on aspirational concepts and future intentions rather than binding commitments that this commission can condition or enforce. Moving on to Village Creek. We in Village Creek, it was mentioned earlier by Jessica that Village Creek is in support of this. We are not. Village Creek has formally submitted an opposition to this project and at least this phase of this project under at least the terms that it's been submitted. So I would like to make that clear to this commission that we as their neighbors, we are not members of the general public. We will have to live with the impacts of this project. And that doesn't feel as though it's being fairly or thoroughly thought through. We've tried to engage the owners in good faith dialogue. I myself have reached out both directly to the owners as well as Jessica. I've not heard much back since this past summer. I wouldn't say none, but I personally have brought forward some objections, some constructive criticism, and frankly, just some friendly neighborly advice. That was not taken seriously or even acknowledged in the case of Jessica. Then I want to move to the meat of the conversation, really. So traffic, parking, spillover, and inequity. The plan as presented is inadequate from a traffic and parking standpoint. The opening traffic projections are absurdly high and nebulous, quite frankly. Yet the proposed solution relies on removing trees potentially to create 40 parking spaces or more for spillover. It's just not concrete as it's been submitted, folks. With the amount of public comment, both publications in the New York Times, the worldwide publications, the London Standard, I think, or the London newspapers, the site is bound to attract much more traffic than will accommodate simply 40 parking spaces. It also raises unresolved security questions. The resident, or are we as the residents to expect private security personnel roaming around our neighborhood streets to enforce site rules? And if so, under what authority, what limits, and with whose oversight? Again, nebulous, no concrete, no real facts here. Jessica herself has referenced other popular sites in Norwalk that attract visitors, but those locations have infrastructure to accommodate both parking and traffic. Manresa Island does not. The single access road into Manresa is a one-lane coming and going, so two-lane traffic. I myself drive this road every day to and from the train station or to and from just to get in and out of Norwalk writ large. It's my only egress, or anyone in Harborview or Village Creek. I know that there was a traffic, we all heard the traffic study that was submitted here. There is traffic that backs up on just a regular old Tuesday because there is a water main break or just reasons, right? It's not being fairly sized up. Moving on to the wildlife and ecological impacts, this project is going to introduce human and automobile traffic at a scale that the site has never experienced with sensitive habitat. The island is home to bald eagles, turban turtles, and other wildlife species that rely on undisturbed areas for nesting, feeding, and survival. There is just no math that gets you to adding in people at any scale that's going to not drive away that wildlife. And many of those are federally protected species, I would add. Lastly, I want to talk about the disparity of resources and the inequity of us as the abutting neighbors. The stark reality is the owners of Manresa are billionaires and have virtually unlimited financial, legal, and technical resources to push this project forward. We've all heard from highly qualified and highly paid both technical experts and other experts. We in Village Creek, Harborview, Shorefront Park, we don't have the means. We work for a living, right? We don't have the means to hire, legal experts to abut some of these opinions, and that just places risk on us as everyday residents that have to live with this. So my request to the commission is this: defer any approvals of this permit, of this project, until independent third-party environmental and traffic analysis can be completed. I myself have asked that directly of the owners in a meeting this past summer. That was met with deafening silence. Require documented good faith engagement with directly abutting residents. So that would be us in Village Creek, Harborview, Shorefront Park. Require a detailed enforceable traffic and enforcement management plan that explicitly prevents neighborhood spillover and accounts for visitors who are turned away. Clarify whether private security or enforcement activities would extend beyond the project site, and prohibit such activities in residential neighborhoods absent explicit authorization. Prohibit reliance on tree removal or temporary site modifications as a primary solution to parking and traffic issues. Just in a closing statement, again, I can't speak for Village Creek or at large, but I can say that I myself would be very excited about a simple green space. That is not what we are considering here. I don't think that anyone in the right mind would be opposed to a park. I've always envisioned a park here. We are requesting that Norwalk's land use process function as intended, protect neighborhoods, safeguarding environmental resources and wildlife, and ensuring those with the least resources are not unfairly burdened while billionaires control the project and its impacts. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tom Busey.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tom Busey. I live at 50 Shorefront Park. I've been here for about a dozen years. During that time, I've passed Manresa Island virtually every day, sometimes on a walk or a run, sometimes in a kayak or a stand-up paddle. But I've never been able to enjoy it from within, only peer into it from outside. My wife and I are very nature forward. We own a second home in the Adirondacks where we're deeply engaged in preserving natural places. Here in Norwalk, my wife serves on the board of the Norwalk Tree Alliance. I support the Northern Forest Concept Plan because it reopens a piece of waterfront land to the public that has been kept from us for many years. Frankly, it baffles me that folks are so actively trying to defend the current status quo, which is absolutely unacceptable, rather than embrace this plan, which emphasizes safety, ecological restoration, and the creation of learning spaces. It will also make the habitat safer and healthier over time. The trails and small clearings that are planned are meaningful, while low impact and quiet for surrounding neighbors. I'd like to thank the Manresa group that spoke tonight and presented tonight for their thoughtful plan. I'd also like to thank the McCords and congratulate them on the commitment they're making to Norwalk, which seems to be lost in a lot of this. Tonight, I'm asking the commission to support the Northern Forest concept and to keep the review moving forward through the required approval process. Because in doing so, you'll begin to reverse a terrible decision that was made over half a century ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Dan Ryan.
Mr. Ryan, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I don't see a microphone icon next to his name. Dan, you may have to just check your microphone input. We will come back to you. Next is Emma O'Neill.
Hi, my name is Emma O'Neill. I'm a resident of Village Creek, and I'm a landscape architect by training and an architect also in practice. I'd like to speak to the chair and the commissioners against supporting this proposal. I'm not against nature, and I'm certainly not against trees, and I'm not against learning. I have very, very serious concerns about the planning process, and in particular about 4 major items for the Northern Forest development. One, the statement that they were going to maintain the existing hydraulic patterns, which was stated tonight multiple times, and that there would be only a slight increase in the water off flow from the new parking lot. So I wonder why, again, this parking lot has to be raised up so high. Surely that will change the existing hydraulic patterns of the site. Secondly, the lighting they're proposing. This is not a campus parking lot, nor is it a big box store. This is a nature preserve, which is open to the public during daylight hours, I believe. Therefore, why is there a necessity for any lighting in the parking lot? And if there needs to be some for emergency vehicles or in case of an accident, why can it not be low-level bollard lighting like you would see in a state park? Thirdly, they mentioned the buffering of the parking lot from the nature preserve itself, as well as from the adjoining neighborhoods. And yet, in their plans, they're showing ground cover, not substantial, at least 5-foot shrubs or even trees between the existing access road and the new access road to the parking lot. So again, why did it go in, I think there was a scheme A where it was real trees and an actual buffer zone, to simple ground cover? And fourthly, on the topic of traffic, I mean, I'm astounded at their calculations of 30 to 40 trucks a day for up to 7 months. I mean, the impact of that on the greater part of South Norwalk is going to be extraordinary. And I believe, I think it's probably because they are filling the site up to 15 feet high, which is completely unnecessary. And if you think about a nature preserve, and they've gone to great trouble to choose water resilient plantings, why does a parking lot have to be 15 feet above flood level? Why are we protecting cars from water when the cars will not be there if there's a flood event? And this idea of 40 trucks a day for 7 months to what will be an ecological nature preserve, do you think that our bald eagles and egrets and osprey will still be there for the children to witness when this site opens? I mean, it is extraordinary to think that we will be witnessing 40 trucks a day all the way through town. And I'm not just talking about Village Creek and Harbour View. We're talking about people who live on Woodward and in the neighborhoods adjacent to Woodward Avenue, as well as on Meadow Street, which actually has residents on it. So I would really like you, as our commissioners, to reconsider approval for this scheme, because I think it is not thought through on any basis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jason Patlis.
Hi, good evening, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Earlier, I submitted comments in writing on behalf of the Maritime Aquarium at Norwalk in support of the plan under review today, and especially with some of the wonderful presentations made by the Manresa team earlier, going into the details of the plan. I will be brief and just underscore 2 points that I'd like to make, one on process, one on substance. On substance, excuse me, getting over a sinus infection. On substance, the plan in designing the different pockets of the Northern Forest, offering space for people, especially for children, students, in a natural setting, is incredibly thoughtful and balanced. The Maritime Aquarium, as noted earlier, is a partner in the effort with Manresa. But beyond that, we are a national leader in STEM education, nationally recognized, and the strength of our programs really rests on getting students up close and personal with nature through the animals in our collection, but more importantly, and more impactfully for the students, getting them out into the Long Island Sound ecosystem. We do it at Calf Pasture Beach, we do it at Vets Park, Sheffield Island, and the forest throughout Fairfield County. What is being conceived in Manresa, particularly in the Northern Forest to start, is really exceptional. And our educators have been there and are just nothing short of ecstatic over the opportunity to bring up to 60,000 students into the area for their educational inspiration. On the process, I want to commend the MIC team for undertaking really an extensive process to solicit public feedback long before required through the regulatory process or the permitting process. The folks standing up this effort have undertaken to reach out to the community. The Maritime Aquarium has hosted a number of these events. My staff and I have attended these events where they've been held throughout Norwalk. And the extensive overture to the public to solicit input, comments, I find truly unique, especially given that it has not been statutorily or regulatory required. Just lastly, in conclusion, let me, in the spirit of Ms. Vanishek's comments, on a personal note, let me say this. And this is speaking not really on behalf of the Maritime Aquarium, but on myself, Jason Patlas. For the better part of 40 years, I've worked on issues of natural conservation, endangered species conservation, open space issues. I've done it for the U.S. Congress, for the administration. I've done it overseas, in Asia. I've done it in the not-for-profit space. I have come across nothing as unique or as transformational on a multi-generational, on a multi-dimensional level as what is being proposed here for Manresa. To take these 125 acres and make them into a public space for the benefit of the community and the benefit of the environment, starting with the 28 acres at issue here in the National Forest, again, is just breathtaking in my opinion. And it's an effort that I am deeply honored to support both personally and on behalf of the aquarium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dave Lindsay.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is David Lindsay. I've lived at 10 Outer Road in the Village Creek neighborhood of Norwalk since 1969. Want to thank the Planning and Zoning Commission for allowing public comments on this application. I heard the first gentleman to speak in this public comment section from the Fox Run area of Norwalk ask for this project to be approved. And certainly lots of support for the project from many city residents and politicians, both locally and at the state level. But the reality is that the vast majority of those people do not live in close proximity to Manresa and are not going to be affected by it day in and day out. And while I commend Manresa's efforts on community outreach, that outreach doesn't really mean anything if the public comments and concerns are not taken into account. I heard in an earlier presentation tonight, the Manresa project manager called the project a community gift. But many of the immediate neighbors believe that the quote unquote gift that we'll be receiving will be the destruction of the tranquility and peacefulness of our neighborhoods, with devastating increases in traffic, garbage, noise, lighting, and an influx of non-residents coming into our neighborhoods. Just going to address one of those issues, which is it's the biggest one, and it's traffic. And as you all know, traffic is one of the biggest complaints that Norwalk residents have currently, regardless of any construction that's going to be going on the Manresa site. The traffic study presented tonight doesn't seem realistic to me, either in the weekday or weekend estimates, or on assuming an average of a 2-hour parking duration. And I'm curious as to whether a comparison can be drawn with Calf Pasture or the other parks in Norwalk, looking at these factors. And Ty and Bond said that, buses and foot access will cut down the parking needs. Just want to point out that currently there's no sidewalk between Woodward Avenue and the Manresa property. And I also recall that Commissioner Cantor said that agreed with Jessica on that interest will wane after the park is open for a while, but that will take years because the park is going to be developed over a number of years. So I'm not really seeing that as something that's reasonable to keep this moving forward in this way. And Manresa said that their security will turn away cars once the parking is full for the Northern Forest. But they obviously can't dictate where those cars will go. I heard Commissioner Schulman and Tabitschneck brought up the fact that overflow traffic will end up in the immediate neighborhoods, which I feel is a given. There's not going to be any way to keep that from happening, is my opinion. And even if there's implementation of a reservation system for parking, I don't think that's likely to keep people from driving to the site. I don't know how that would be implemented. If we're going to have signs on 95 saying don't come, there's no parking. I mean, it seems difficult to make that work. And I know that Commissioner Jordan Byron had asked about how that circulator bus idea might operate. And I have heard that Manresa folks talk about that in the past. But I'm curious about where the money for that might be coming from, and if that's something that would end up falling on Norwalk's taxpayers. And lastly, I just want to say the last speaker from Ty and Bond talked about the workers' access to the site and admitted that there are very few ways to access Manresa coming through South Norwalk. And this will obviously apply to traffic from park goers as well. And I would just ask that the commission proceed extremely carefully with this application while taking into account the lives of those residents who will forever be impacted by this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, just have Mark.
Mark, if you're speaking, your microphone is still muted.
Mark, to unmute. There's a microphone icon. It should be located at the bottom of your screen.
It was actually a three-step process for some reason. Anyway,
we can hear you now.
Mark,
yes, go ahead.
Mark Hawley, Village Creek. I'm very excited about this whole project. I think it's great the way they're going about the rewilding, the renativizing, the plantings. As a neighbor, my concerns are with the lights and the traffic. Do we really need lights at all? It's a manned gatehouse. I assume that means they're closing it and no one's going to go in there. We're not creating a new lover's lane or anything. So there won't be any nighttime use and then therefore no need for lights, even on the driveway portion, at least in this phase of the project. Again, still very excited about this thing and I want it to get done and done right in the way that's least harmful to the neighborhood. We're all going to live here still. With regard to traffic, I'm very concerned that Woodward Avenue and Tigan Bond. I think that guy took off. Chris, yeah. Anyway, it's roadways are classified like on a standard, okay, it's a 2-lane road. Man, Woodward Avenue, I hope most of you have driven down it. It's got on-street parking, kids playing. It's really narrow to begin with. There's, I don't know how many driveways cut into it, both residential and commercial. It's probably, they're probably using a classification that it doesn't qualify for to carry the traffic it carries now. Even this small amount of cars will probably live through just fine from the northern forest or North Forest, I'm not sure which. But still, it's a concern and it's a consideration. We'll probably be going more in depth with real traffic studies at some point rather than the little traffic letter that he wrote. The fence, we lift it up a little at the bottom so the diamondback terrapins can use their old nesting grounds. It's 8 feet tall. It'll keep the deer out. Can we, before you erect that fence, can we dart the deer with some contraceptives so that the new natural level of population, since they won't be able to use their current living room, the natural level of the new population will be lower, and it would be nice if it was just through contraceptives rather than, traffic accidents and starvation. Let's see. Oh, so what are the proposed hours of operation? There's a manned gatehouse. They've talked about the manned gatehouse and somebody patrolling the neighborhood. That sounds like in order to do that, they would have to hire the police, traffic agents. And I don't know how you keep the people from parking along Woodward and its side streets to sneak in. I don't think there's a fee for entry at this point, but I assume that there will be one when the big park gets going. That's hit most of my highlights. I don't want to waste more of your time. You guys are doing a great job. Just doing this service for the community, listening to all this stuff. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you.
And next we have Miguel Frasconi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is I'm Miguel Frasconi. I live at 26 Dock Road, and as I'm sitting in my living room here, I can see the light of the guardhouse at the entrance of Manresa. So I look out at the entire length of the road, going all the way to the power plant. And I'm
Mr. Frasconi, we could hear you really well a moment ago, and then it got a little bit muffled. Do you mind adjusting your microphone?
Yes, thank you. I
Yes.
would think I was covering it up. Anyway, so I see the entire road from the guardhouse all the way down to the power plant. And I might be the only one on this call who I moved here when I was 2. And so in 1958, so I remember the building of the power plant and remember what it was like before. And and I'm all for the nature aspects of this project. So that's what I first heard about this and was really gung-ho. But I'm just going to keep my comments to the lighting aspect. In terms of lighting, at the moment, the way that it's planned, CL&P was a better neighbor than Manresa Wilds will be, because there were no lights on that roadway between the, yes, well, you know what roadway I'm talking about. I also not familiar with any parks that stay open after dusk. So what I would like to see, if it's at all possible, is the streetlights going out at dusk and going on again whenever they're needed in the evening. That would be, that is what, so that would be my recommendation, because I'm really not looking forward to looking out every single day of my life to a lit up lavatory that is going to be not very pleasant. So That's all I have to say at the moment. So please turn the lights out at dusk. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anyone else is interested in speaking, please use the raise your hand tool now. Then we have Jennifer Butler.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Jennifer Butler. I live at 15 Park Lane in Harborview. I'm here to support the opening of the Northwoods of Manresa Wilds while asking that the city of Norwalk take on the burden of making sure that the traffic in and out on Woodward Avenue and Longshore Avenue, Quintard and Meadow Street into special concern. I walk this path every day, and during the school year, children wait for the school buses from 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. And in the afternoon, between 2:30 and 5:30 p.m., these same children are being dropped off, many of which cross the street to get to and from the school bus. We have dog walking neighbors from Harborview, Village Creek, Harbor Shores, Quintard, and Woodward Avenue, all taking a walk throughout the day to get some fresh air. There are kids that ride bikes on these streets. There are kids and adults that play soccer, often chasing balls. I can't tell you how many times I have come across a surprise when a child runs out in the street, or a dog, or whatever events that can arise in a neighborhood. I believe these feeders, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I believe our feeder streets will need more traffic enforcement and support from the city, as the burden is not on Manresa Wilds alone. I appreciate the idea that Manresa Wilds put forth about parking reservations, and I think that is a great way to deter unnecessary cars on the street. So I guess my point is that with proactive traffic planning, the city can ensure that Manresa Wilds is an asset for everyone, visitors and residents alike. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And last call for public comment. If you'd like to speak, use the raise your hand tool. If you're dialed in on a phone, hit *9. Seeing nothing further, Mr. Bryce.
Thank you. Steve, I believe there's one letter we need to read into the record. Is that right?
Yes, I can. We got a late email after I sent out the last batch, so I will read that into the record, and it will be uploaded to the application page tomorrow. It's from Julian Ramsey. She states, "Hello, I'm reaching out to express my support for the Manresa North Forest project proposed by Manresa Wilds. I live locally in Norwalk, and my wife and one-year-old daughter. We have been beyond excited ever since we learned about the Manresa Wilds project. If it goes through, it will have a huge positive impact on our lives and the lives of thousands of Norwalk residents. Access to nature is extremely important to us. We typically go on 2 to 3 hikes per week on local trails, parks, beaches. We have often need to drive 20 to 25 minutes for significant trails and further for coastal trails. Having something like this, the Northern Forest Trail, this close by would be amazing, and I have no doubt we'd be visiting multiple times per week. There are so many families living in the South Norwalk area in apartments and multifamily units that don't have access to large yards and big areas for kids to run around and explore nature. This project will give the gift to all those families, and it's going to have a huge impact on boosting local pride in our city. When people love their community, it makes their community better. I apologize for this late submission, but I really hope you'll greenlight the project. We're all really inspired by the possibility. Thank you, Julian Ramsey."
Thank you, Steve. All right, with that, we will close the public participation of this hearing, and I'll turn it over to Attorney Suchi for the applicant's response to public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the public who participated this evening, took the time out of their busy schedules to share their comments. We thank you for your thoughtful comments and the respectful nature in which you treated the Commission and us as applicants. There are various topics tonight. They're somewhat limited in terms of the scope of what we need to address. And from what we're hearing, and anyone can correct me if I go astray, traffic, parking, lighting, landscaping, and a few others. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over, I think, Jess, if you think it necessary to start with Ty and Bond to address some of the traffic concerns, lighting information, if we didn't already address that in the presentation in chief. Then I guess Jess, Doug, or Chris can respond to some of the other MIC comments, and or Gina Worth can then address some of the landscaping comments. I think those were the general topics that came about, and we'll respond to the comments in general, not really specific going to each individual property owner. I will note that for a project of this nature, we saw many people who joined the meeting. In total, I think there were 12 speakers, and they were generally mixed, pro, con, and middle of the road with some suggested revisions. And we're very pleased that people did take the time to come out tonight. After our team makes those comments, I would like to share some final comments with you, address the standards of review, and a few other comments that were raised that may not be addressed by the team as we move forward. Okay.
Excellent. Colleen, Gina, can we have you address the buffering first and foremost?
Sure, I'm happy to address the buffering. I think the kind of intent with the overall design is that there was a kind of question raised about the alignment of the roadway. So I also just wanted to mention that this was very carefully thought out by the team. We did not want it to leave it in its current alignment and current elevation. It's very vulnerable right now. It's very low-lying elevation, and there is not a substantial buffer of vegetation between the existing road and the adjacent neighbors. So we did want to move it into the site, into the edge of the forest, move it to the east, and that was the location of that movement was very intentional to not impact the existing tree canopy as much as possible, and not fracture or fragment the forest more. So we're trying to keep the roadway contained to that edge space as to preserve the ecological integrity of a larger, more contiguous space that's not fractured by larger roads. The planting buffer that's proposed between the newly proposed elevated road and the existing roadway alignment for construction access, which in the future will be a multimodal path. We've tried to plant with very aggressive, fast-growing species. We are planting them small with the understanding that they will grow quickly, but we understand this to be a temporary landscape because in future phases of the project, that berm and whole kind of edge condition from the roadway to the west will be reconstructed with a lifted multi-use path and a much more substantial, larger planted buffer over time. So I'm just sharing that greater design intent. We're basically trying not to plant large trees and then have to cut them down or rip them up, just a couple of months or years later. We have tried to put in a much larger, more substantial buffer between, like on the edge, the western edge of the parking lot as a more permanent landscape, which will not be impacted in future construction phases of the project. And so there we have a mix of evergreen and deciduous species and larger specimens planted day one. So I hope that kind of describes the intent of both the planning of the roadway alignment and the landscape buffer.
Thank you. Elsa and Nick, did you want to comment on some of the fencing and Terrapin Turtle? Elsa, your mic is not working.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we made it so far.
Wonderful.
No glitch.
All right. So I wanted to respond to.
Excuse me, Elsa, before you start, would you just identify yourself? Because we didn't identify you at the outset. Thank you.
Of course, yes. I didn't speak in the presentation. So my name is Elsa Lohman. I am a registered engineer, professional engineer in civil engineering. I have 20 years of experience in ecological restoration throughout New England and in the greater New York area. So I am with the eDesign team as part of the ecological restoration team. So a comment that we heard that I wanted to respond to was around the Diamondback Terrapin and the way that the fencing was constructed along the proposed access road along the western edge of the access road. So we are working very closely as a team with Eric Davis, Davidson, who is a herpetologist who is very well respected throughout the state. He works closely with the DEEP NDDB department regularly. They're familiar with his work and he's held in very high regard and respect with them. And so we have worked closely with him to develop this plan for exclusion, both during construction as well as long-term exclusionary measures. The fencing that is proposed was specifically designed so that we're not allowing terrapin migration across the road. We are purposefully keeping the terrapin along the western edge of this embankment. This allows them to access what is the prime habitat for them, the sandy slopes with this easily friable material where they prefer to create their nests and have their habitat location. The forest area that they're currently accessing is not as high of habitat quality for the terrapin. It's actually discouraged to have them moving into these nesting areas. And it is preferred both by the terrapin as well as part of this project to keep them along the western edge. So the fencing has been specifically designed so that the terrapin are not able to migrate across this road. And that keeps them from being subject to vehicle mortality. So one of the greatest issues that we see with terrapin in these areas where we have human interaction is the vehicle mortality. And so this is specifically designed to prevent that from happening.
Thank you, Elsa. Can we move on to Ty and Bond to talk about lighting and elevation?
Certainly. Just one point to bring up before we start talking about the elevation and the filling is the natural hydrology of the site and how we're maintaining patterns. The site itself is a very diverse flow of water across the site as it's extremely flat at the moment. So as was indicated much earlier in our slides when Scape was showing the trails, that there was a series of boardwalks as well as concrete planks to maintain patterns. The northern forest, the drainage pattern starts more in the center of the forest, moves up to the northwest corner.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. White. Is it possible to pull that visualization back up on the screen as you're talking through it? Thank you.
Certainly, I can. I will borrow one of the Scape slides. Hold on, here we are. So this center area of the site moves up towards the northwest to what's being called the switchgrass meadow up here, which on our drainage plans was identified as the existing low point where natural infiltration is occurring and is not proposed to have any exfiltration. And then so these patterns are maintained. And then there is a natural swale now that we're maintaining and enhancing along the drives where there is a small high point here. And in this corridor of where the parking is proposed, the drainage pattern shifts and then proceeds to the south. So the idea for how things were laid out and being very contextual with the site, as was mentioned with where things were placed in regards to forest and invasive species, similar was presented with the drainage patterns. So making sure that we can maintain existing patterns to where the stormwater is currently going, maintain those patterns, and then also maintain the patterns that go to the south to Long Island Sound while providing low impact development and best management practices. So another thing that was discussed about was the filling of the site. And we do want to be clear that I did hear someone say we're raising the site by 15 feet. We're not raising the site to 15. The portion of the site that is being raised, actually another slide forward where it shows grading. The area of the comfort station is located in the southeast that I'm circling here with my cursor. This point is at elevation 15, which does represent a fill of the site. Immediately beyond the confines of this comfort station, the grade does start to break. We come down, as mentioned before, the grades vary from 15 to we're at 12.5 by the time we are exiting the driveway till we get to the 11.5 that we are maintaining for the driveway itself. That 11.5 was not randomly selected. We did discuss that we are meeting the Resilient South Norwalk, which takes into account a 10-year still water elevation of elevation 8.2. And then we add a 1.5 foot height wave action height. So that elevates it additionally. And then CIRCO, which is the Connecticut Resiliency Association, is forecasting a 20-inch stormwater rise by 2050. That brings us to 11.4 feet of seawater elevation rise in the 10-year storm. So this site was designed for 11.5 elevation access for the roadway. As part of Manresa's goals for the project, it is to be sustainable and resilient, not only for this generation, but generations to come. So it was a hallmark of the project to ensure that we are designing contextually for now and for the future. And so that was really governing the grades. Also, as mentioned earlier in these slides, everything is being provided as ADA accessible, which is governed by 2% side slopes and 5% longitudinal slopes. So none of these grades are abrupt. These are gently rising and will contextually fit with what we are proposing for resiliency, as well as maintaining future generations to come. Moving on to the lighting. As discussed earlier, the current Norwalk regulations require 1 foot candle for parking areas. The proposed site lighting is also lower in mounting height than the existing lighting that's at the current entrance. These new fixtures are proposed 24 feet above grade. The Eversource lights that exist on the current access way are 28 feet, the luminaires above the grade. So reducing the mounting height typically requires additional fixtures. So if we were to reduce the overall height to still maintain the 1 foot candle that is required by zoning, we would have to increase the number of poles. So it was a balance between number of poles versus the height of the poles. The proposed luminaires are full cutoff and they oriented to limit the light output to the west. If desired, we can provide back shields to further reduce westward light. As designed, illumination at the frontage line will not exceed the 0.2 foot candle, and the photometric analysis indicates no light spill beyond the property lines. The photometric exhibit, this yellow shading that you still see in front of you, illustrates the extent of calculated illumination down to the 0.1 foot candle. So light levels extend only minimally beyond the existing access drive, again highlighted in orange.
And we are designing the lighting scheme for the access roadway for the dual purpose of not just park access, but long-term Eversource access to their on-site active substation distribution. So there is a dual program intention. We have been meeting with Eversource to try to implement a motion sensor timing system with the lights to turn them off when they're like no longer needed. But that's just something we have to work through with Eversource because they have an easement on our access road that we're working with them together. But again, we're doing everything we can with the pole height fixture selection, and Andrew mentioned back shielding as necessary to make sure that there's no light pollution beyond our project bounds.
Question for you on the lighting component. understanding that the zoning regulations require the 1 foot candle and the easement requires lighting for the access road, is any lighting needed for the dusk or nighttime access to the northern forest for programming or the public access?
Yes, do you want to, or Doug?
It is the contemplation is that the passive enjoyment of the park continue after dusk. In fact, Norwalk, the city of Norwalk, back in January of 2025, the council approved the standardization of park hours, doing away with the dawn to dusk, which is found to be difficult to enforce because there's no enforcement certainty. That went into effect in March of 2025, and those are for most of the parks in in Norwalk, are typically 9:30, extending to 10:30 between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So that's what the city standards for the park are today, and that's what we're looking to comply. Then the lights would typically stay on up to 90 minutes after. They're all shielded again. They all comply with the 5 pillars of dark sky, but they would be there for cleanup, policing the grounds to make sure no one is left there and that everyone's out of the park, and other safety things that have to be done relative to the ecological restoration. So that's the intent.
Thank you. As a follow-up question, one of the neighbor comments raised a question about using like bollard-style lighting to still provide access or lighting of the roadway and parking lot. Was that considered for the site?
So bollard lighting would not be sufficient to provide the 1 foot candle over the parking area, the minimum foot candle. So it really isn't feasible for a parking lot application. Typically, we see those along walkways or trails where you're trying to have more wayfinding lighting than trying to meet this type of standard that's set forth by the city.
Thank you.
And I will want to point out that the lighter illumination foot candle exhibit shown here is isolated to the roadway and the parking area. We were intentional to not include additional lighting within the trails or the clearings as part of the dark sky pillars, and really focusing on the infrastructural, operational, access, and safety needs to get to and from the parking lot. But the rest of the North Forest trails and clearings will be much more passive without lighting.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tammy.
Oh, thank you. Perhaps this is for Mr. Murphy. Could you just explain a little bit better what the foot candle is versus a bollard versus a light on a pole? Because I don't understand what a foot candle is relative to those other types of lighting.
Yeah, foot candle is just the universal measurement of how bright light is at any additional point. So it's just like a point cloud on the ground. That's an engineering program runs any type of fixture location, height, intensity that we are planning for, and shows the display of it onto the ground. So this yellow clouded area is really just everywhere where the light touches from the fixtures that we selected. Andrew's point about whether or not we could have trialed out bollards, there would have been points all over, and the foot candle light play from them would not cover all the areas of activation or vehicle safety. So it's just not a viable fixture type for this type of use. So we went with standard pole mounted. We went with pole mounted fixtures lower than the existing Eversource access road lights to also, reduce any potential for light pollution.
Commissioner, bollards, I believe, Chris, are typically 3.5 to 4 feet in height. Just they're very low.
Yeah, I've seen a number of parking lots with bollards, and I think they're effective, and they create a more natural environment, especially in an area like this where it is all natural as opposed to a commercial type parking lot. So I would be in favor of trying to minimize whatever lighting is there. I understand for phase two, you don't want to redo things, but I think the neighbors would have the same concern with lighting poles. And if CL&P has some standard where they have to have tall light poles, okay, maybe we have to work with that. And I like your idea of trying to get Eversource or United Illuminating to eliminate the lights when they are not needed, sort of to come on demand, if you will. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we're committed to partnering with them to work towards a solution there, Tammy. We agree.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. I just wanted to follow up with some comments on community engagement. I had heard Mr. Smith's response to in the public hearing, and just want to be clear that we've really reached out to the community to the best of our ability. And if any responses were missed, we do apologize. I think to this date, we've talked to more than 3,000 people and have more than 3,000 comments that have fed directly into the update of the concept plan, which again, we'll be talking about on February the 19th. What I can say is that we actually met, Allison and Austin McCord met directly with Village Creek, Harborview, Harbor Shore, Wilson Point, and Shorefront Park in order to be able to have small, very specific community meetings. And in addition to that, we actually invited all of the residents of those communities to our site. We had over 150 people on the site one Saturday in September in order to be able to follow up on community meetings with them directly so that people could see the site and also provide us with feedback in the moment in time. We have been reaching out to multiple community groups and different organizations, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce or the Rotary groups. And so I did want to comment on that if anyone feels as though we haven't been responsive, I do apologize for that. And but at the same time, we've actively gone out and invited communities to be able to be a part of the process. We've had 1,200 RSVPs for Community 1 and probably about 800 people there. Community 2, pretty much the same amount, probably about 500 people at Brian McMahon School, and Community Meeting 3, over 1,000 people participate. So right now we're at approximately 400 RSVPs for Community Meeting 4. And we've spent a lot of the time on the phone with people from Village Creek, from Harborview, from Shorefront Park, and from Harbor Shores in order to be able to answer any questions that people may have specifically about traffic and lighting and how we're working with both the city and the state to be able to address those things. A lot of those responses you've seen today in the Northern Forest proposal that has been in front of you. And so I do want to assure you that we've been talking with the community for well over a year, both in larger groups and also one-on-one, in order to be able to understand not only why people are proponents of the park and want to see the park, but we spent a lot of time with people who are not fans of the park, and not to be able to convince them of anything else, but to understand sort of where that's coming from and understand where the concerns are coming from, so that we're not missing anything from a project planning standpoint on it relating to traffic. I mean, this is how we actually found out about the 3-point turn at Dock Road with the school buses and the Norwalk Transit District. It's how we found out about people parking in places, and how we've incorporated the roundabout. And so as we look through the Northern Forest proposal, a lot of those components that have been brought into that are actually driven very specifically from community engagement, including really bringing the trail system in from Harborview and creating that very large buffered area along the eastern side of the site, which really brings the trees away from the households bordering the property on that side. And so I wanted to communicate that to the commission, that we've worked hard to be able to talk with the public and incorporate a great deal of feedback. And I hope that folks understand and know that. Thank you. Attorney Suchi.
I think, Christopher, you were going to address traffic quickly.
Right.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yep. So I just want to kind of address a few of the kind of general comments that we heard associated with the traffic. And so kind of one of the themes was around the amount of traffic that would be coming to the site on a daily basis. And as I kind of mentioned in my presentation, we did utilize kind of industry standard methodologies to estimate what a passive public park would generate, which is what this is with trails and, gathering spaces. We do talk about the fact that there could be additional programming around school and learning type events, and we've provided bus parking on the site to kind of accommodate those potentially larger gatherings of students and educational practices. And they would come on a bus and utilize those areas as a group rather than those groups all driving individual cars during the school day. And so based on our ability to generate, estimate what the site will generate on a daily basis, we believe that our estimates are accurate, and that in talking with the city and the folks from TMP, they were also in agreement with the methodology that we used with the traffic that we were generating on a daily basis for the park post-development. So then just transitioning over to some of the questions around truck traffic and construction activities. We did have several discussions with the folks from TMP about how, in their vision, we should, build the park. And so as we talked through those issues with them, we worked with them on what was a reasonable number of trucks to come to the site on a daily basis. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we've got a peak of 4 trucks per hour, which is 1 truck every 15 minutes coming to the site during the day, throughout a normal work day. And so when we talked with TMP, that seemed like a number that they were fairly comfortable with, from the context of being able to build the project within the 11-month schedule, while also kind of limiting how much truck traffic would be on Woodward Avenue on a daily basis. And so in working with them and, hearing their commentary on kind of controlling the amount of truck traffic that we would see on a daily basis, that was their recommendation and kind of where they wanted the project to land as far as construction activity.
Yeah. To layer onto that, we had much more aggressive trucking goals to get the import on site quickly and build the project in an accelerated fashion. But to Chris's point, we met with TMP and spread out the construction trips to be less impactful to the neighborhood. So that was direct coordination with TMP and being thoughtful of the community access route.
And then along the lines of the haul routes, those, like I said in my presentation, those were also routes that TMP essentially prescribed us to use, recognizing that those are the larger roadway corridors through South Norwalk, the state routes through South Norwalk, and intended to kind of carry that traffic to avoid getting any of that traffic into some of the residential streets and neighborhoods. So, that was how they kind of directed us to essentially require the project to be built. And then just one last point, as Jess mentioned during the kind of dialogue that we had with the commission during the presentation, the Manresa folks are going to have a parking reservation system for the site that will allow them to control the amount of cars that would come to the site with kind of pre-booked parking. And so that will also be in place to help manage the amount of traffic that's actually traveling to the site. And so I think the combination of, what the Northern Forest is, which is a passive kind of recreation and park area, the parking reservation system, and, alignment with our trip generation estimates for the site, we believe that the site can accommodate the on-site parking appropriately, and that the small amount of traffic that will be generated, by the site once it gets past that kind of initial uptick, which we expect to happen, will not have an impact on the roadway system.
Richard?
Yes, I had just a curiosity question as to what the nature and duration of the easement was with CL&P.
The easement along the access road has been transferred over to Eversource. So there's one for access, there's one for an underground transmission line, one for an overhead transmission line or distribution line, and then some aerial easements. But the one that we're focused on with this is really the access road that we are sharing with them into the interior of the site as well as to their substation. So they have rights to get to their substation.
So there's an active substation still going on the site?
Yes, sir. Very much so. It's the original power generation into the grid for the old Manresa power plant. It doesn't obviously act as a power generation port anymore, but it is still an active transmission distribution substation that they use for moving power around the grid. So they have trucks in and out every day, get it going in there and servicing the gear.
Thank you.
Nick?
I think this is directed to Attorney Suchi, but whomever, can you remind me what were the years that the power plant was open from? Was it like 58 to like 93 or something, or 2000? I forget.
Generally speaking, the power plant was opened in 1960, thereabout, late 50s, early 60s, and the last that it was operational, as I understand it, was 2013.
2013. Okay, awesome. So it's been there anyway. It's only more recently unoperational. Anyway, thank you.
With the exception, of course, of the substation that Chris Murphy just talked about.
Of course.
Okay. I think the subsequent presentations by members of our team addressed the majority of the concerns and comments and questions raised by the public. I do have a few things that I'd like to share in response to some of the public commentary, and then I have a very quick wrapping up commentary myself. One comment was made, I believe, by Mr. Smith, that he said that this relies on aspirational, not binding commitments. And as this commission knows, should these applications be approved, any approval would be based upon the plans and reports submitted, and the approval would be tied to those plans and reports that were submitted, and they're made part of any approval that you would grant if you so desire to grant the application. There was a comment that there was a belief that perhaps our private security would then be patrolling those streets in the neighborhood. That's just not the case. The comment was that we have private security for our site, and the private security would be on hand in the event that the parking lot is full to direct individuals that off our site to indicate that the parking lot is full and they can't park there. But they would have no right, obligation, authority, or anything else to patrol the streets or do anything with respect to parking around the neighborhood. That is the responsibility of the Norwalk Police Department. There was an assertion that I believe by Ms. O'Neill that this was not a thought out plan on any basis. And despite that assertion, I think without question, the years of analysis and observations and methodologies and conclusions drawn substantiate the robustness of the plans and the reports and the dedication and the time and effort put into creating the plans before you and the project before you for the North Forest. Those were, I think, just some observations that I wanted to share. So in conclusion, the two applications before you, once again, are the Coastal Site Plan Review, which was submitted under Section 6.10.2B.2 and Section 8.4.5.f. And that is due to the proximity of some activities near to the tidal wetlands, as well as special permit application with respect to the importation of materials and activity on the site, submitted pursuant to Section 6.2.2D, 6.3.2C, and Section 8.4.8G-2, A through O. Those are the standards of review. The Coastal Site Plan application standards of review are as follows. We have to evaluate the potential effects, both beneficial and adverse, of the proposed activity on future water-dependent development activities. We present to you that the North Forest does not impair any future development plans for the southern 100 acres where water-dependent activities, including the opening of more than 1 mile of waterfront for the public access and other recreational educational activities, will be provided. 2, the potential impact in the rise of sea level, coastal flooding, erosion patterns on both coastal resources and coastal development. Again, the North Forest project avoids impact to all tidal wetlands and intertidal buffer zones, does not involve any dredging, filling, or in-water work within the coastal resources. There's an enhanced vegetative cover and soil stability that will reduce flood and erosion-related vulnerabilities while also improving water quality, reducing sediment, nutrient uploading, and enhanced upland infiltration before the water reaches the Norwalk Harbor and Long Island Sound. In addition, goals and policies of the Coastal Management Act and identification of any conflict between the proposed development, use, or activity is required to be evaluated. And again, we submit that the North Forest meets the requirement of the Coastal Connecticut Management Act and is adequately protective of the interest of these regulations and of the City of Norwalk's coastal resources and its policies. As far as the special permit application is concerned, there are various standards of review. One is density and use and bulk of buildings. The only structure proposed is the small restroom, so we are clearly consistent with the density of use and bulk of buildings in the CD1S zone. All proposed uses for which a site plan is required shall provide for ingress and egress to the site. We have demonstrated that with the new roadway and the ingress and egress to the parking lot. The Commission may require such reasonable improvements as may be necessary to accommodate traffic increase caused by the proposed development to maintain existing levels of service. Based upon the presentation by Mr. Granatini and his report, quote, based on the trip generation estimates proposed for phase 1 and the qualitative review of the access and circulation patterns, traffic associated with the North Forest is not expected to result in material adverse impacts on the surrounding roadway network. And that's in the traffic statement that was submitted. Availability of mass transit facilities, provision of sidewalks with a minimum clearance. Sidewalks do exist on Woodward Avenue. No sidewalks are proposed at this time, but we do also look forward to working with the Wheels and the Newark Transit District to hopefully have the Wheels route number 2 extend to the site. And discussions are certainly underway with the Transit District with respect to that. Availability and compatibility of utilities. The property is and will continue to be served by the utilities that exist today. Adverse impact from noise, odor, dust, fumes, and artificial lighting. I think we've gone through that in great detail between SCAPE and a tie and bond with respect to lighting and how the lighting has been appropriately designed to be as least intrusive as possible. Signs of size and design that are in harmony with the neighborhood. Well, we certainly will be coming back with a sign package for Manresa, and we will make that sign package consistent and appropriate for the area. Adequacy of yards and open space. Without question, there is adequate yards and open space, and with the exception of the small restroom and parking lot, no other structures are proposed, and that North Forest 28 acres remains open. Impact on neighboring property owners as compared to uses and structures permitted as a matter of right. This is important in that the uses that are permitted in the CD1S zone should not go unnoticed. For example, the most significant use is single-family residential. If this property, whether it's the 120 acres or the 28 acres, was subdivided into single-family residential lots, there would be, over the entirety of the property, over 150 possible single-family residentially zoned lots. The 28 acres would have many, many residentially zoned lots that could be created. 28 acres divided by 6250 is the minimal lot size for the CD1S zone. There are a lot of possibilities for the development of the 28-acre North Forest into a single-family development, which would no longer provide the public access to this open space that has been devoutly wished for the past 75 years. There are other, standards of review, existing land use in the area that's residential. There's some warehouse on Woodward Avenue. There's a public park. Proximity of community facilities. Woodward Avenue Park is located less than a quarter of a mile away to the north. Compliance with the zoning regulations and plan of conservation and development. It's important to note that in the POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development, it emphasizes that in addition to pursuing planning and funding for public access to Long Island Sound on Manresa, it also seeks to provide public access to the coast in disposition plans for Manresa Island. The POCD recognized the importance of Manresa Island among the city strategies for, quote, opportunities to provide more public access to the water, including streams as well as the Norwalk River and coastline, end quote, and then establishing open space on the Manresa Peninsula. Clearly, the objectives of the POCD have been reached by opening up the 28 acres of the North Forest to public access. Utilization of green infrastructure, we have addressed that in our moving papers. Conservation of wetlands, watercourses, and other ecologically available lands. As I mentioned at the outset, the petition to amend the city's wetland map was approved, so the 2 areas that were questionable wetlands were delisted and are no longer wetlands. However, should we move forward with other project components for Manresa Wilds, and it does impact, there are activities proposed within the upland review area of any existing and mapped wetlands, of course, we would be obligated to submit applications to the Inland Wetland Agency, the City of Norwalk. And lastly, there are no zoning violations on the property. Manresa Wilds North Forest will provide open space, trails, water views, and so much to Norwalk residents, and especially for neighbors in close proximity who can walk or bike to the site. It's a transformational project. I don't think anyone can dispute that. Opening up space within an amazing ecological attributes, views, and other amenities to a site that has been closed to the public for 75 years, which 50, 75 years ago, the public wanted as a park. We have now come full circle. We hope that we have answered your questions. We hope that we have been as open and transparent as possible in doing so. We ask that you move forward with this application this evening, and we look forward to your action tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Suchi and application team. Are there any questions for the applicant? All right. Everyone is seated for this application. Is there a motion for this application?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Nick. Second. Second from Richard. Steve or Brian, do you mind pulling up the resolution?
Sure.
Thank you.
Brian, can you make it just a little larger?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds.
Okay, thanks.
Is that good, or would you like some more?
No, that's fine.
And for clarity here, we are acting on both the special permit and coastal site plan review.
Let me just scroll up just to make sure. Yeah, it's just the memo.
Yep. Related to the second whereas, or the second indented one, I am concerned about the truck traffic and really wish that the barge was a viable option. And I'd encourage the applicant, especially since they're still on and listening, to continue to work with Connecticut Department of Transportation to see if it's a viable option for this phase of the project, and especially for future phases.
Chapin,
Mm-hmm.
would another viable option be to make the grade lower? I mean, the height of 15 feet is really for residential dwelling, and the only dwelling there is the bathroom, which, you know, seems perhaps overkill.
Yeah. From what I heard from the applicant tonight, unfortunately we can't ask them, but from what I heard from the applicant tonight, the raised roadway isn't so much to keep the vehicles and structure out of the flood zone today. It's more thinking of in 2050, what are the levels going to be, and adjusting for the height of the wave, as well as I think I heard 20 or so inches of stormwater runoff. So making sure that the site is still accessible in roughly 2050 or so. And so that's what I had heard as to why I have it higher today, is to ensure that they don't need to redo the road in 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I think it's still a concern.
Beyond that, Tammy, if I heard them correctly, that was for protection against a 10-year storm. We know very well that we've been experiencing 50 and even 100-year storms. So I think it makes sense to stay at that 15-foot level.
Yeah. This was. Oh, go ahead, Tammy.
I think that if there were residences there, that would make a lot of sense, but it's a nature preserve. And if we are experiencing a large storm of any magnitude, the park would be closed and nobody would be there. So to me, it still is overkill.
Yeah, that was my impression as well, though I'm understanding now that the concern is that the road itself would not be above water in 25 years if it was not raised to this height today. It sounds like it's on the future-proofing side.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I too looked at the numbers for the amount of fill being imported, and that was the most significant amount. And so looking to see how we could reduce that was top of my list. So I'm glad the applicant addressed that tonight.
Right. I mean, preserving that road when basically all of Harborview would be underwater, if that's the case. I'm not saying it might not be. I'm just too much for me.
So I added number 4 in response to some of the comments. To something for you guys to consider, really, to deal with the lighting.
Seems very sensible.
I agree. There is a regulation that we have that requires lighting to be turned off in parks at a certain hour. I think it's 10 o'clock on every night except for Friday and Saturday, where it's 11, if I recall correctly. So that's one that we'll need to apply. I'm not sure how that competes against an easement, but
just be careful about parks and what's a private property that's being used as a park, and I just want to be very careful about making those assertions.
I also added number 11 per the chairman's comments earlier.
Steve, on number 8, should we say something about significant changes having to come back to the commission? Or is it understood that the staff will insist on that?
I can add that. I think we've done that in the past.
It's been a lengthy evening. I apologize if this was covered or if it's standardized, but was there any mention on whether those bathrooms come with changing stations? Is that required by any sort of regulation currently? Was there any mention of that I missed?
I didn't hear that tonight, though I think it's worth making that request to the applicant. I don't know whether we can include that as a formal condition, but sorry, Ms. Vonacek, we cannot hear from you at this time.
Yeah. If I can just shout out into the void, should any applicants be listening, that when I show up to the park, there should be a changing station in the bathroom, please. Not that I'm planning to have another one on principle.
Steve, is there any reason we couldn't insert that language?
The changing station language?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to put that as they must or they shall consider?
At the very least, I would say shall consider.
All right. I don't know where to shove that in, but I'll shove it in here.
There are regulations that talk about changing.
I'm not sure if there are. I keep wondering that. And
It'd be building code. I imagine it'd be in the building code than it would be in.
Because plenty of restaurants don't have them.
What?
Like plenty of restaurants with huge bathrooms and plenty of space do not have them.
Anyway, I don't think that'll I don't think
tangent.
that's going to be a big burden for them.
No.
Thank you. I just appreciate like making sure they don't forget about it. If there's a reason it doesn't make sense, but just like not to forget about it.
Just doing a little housekeeping. Sorry about that. I'll do that after. I think that's the last condition there.
If I'm counting correctly, we actually have 10 commissioners on this evening, and sorry for my miscount earlier. With that, I see Diana on my screen second. So Diana, do you mind being unseated from this application? Thank you.
Are we ready to vote? I'm ready to vote.
All right. Is there any other comments before we move to a vote? All right. Brian or Steve, do you mind calling the roll?
Sure. Mr. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Rowena?
Yes.
Ms. Langalis?
Yes, but with a couple little reservations.
Let me see who else. Ms. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Jordan Byron?
Yes.
Ms. Tabachnik?
Yes, and I hope we can learn through this phase to better plan for the next phase and understanding the impact.
Mr. Schulman?
Yes.
And I believe last is Mr. Bryce.
Yes.
That is unanimous.
It is unanimous. Thank you
Thank
for your
you, everyone,
presentation.
tonight for your time, for your attention. And again, thank you to the public for joining tonight's meeting. We do appreciate everything that you listen to and your deliberation. We look forward to getting going on the North Forest and also to returning to you for the remaining portions of what will be a wonderful Manresa Wilds. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And in that pause, I have to say goodnight, everyone. I have to go deal with the kid thing right now. But good seeing everyone as we're on the kid trick there, or whatever. But be well, everyone.
Good night, Nick.
I have to bounce as well, but not a kid thing, a wife thing.
All right. Well, we have one more item on the agenda while we still have a good night, Richard.
Thank you.
While we still have a quorum.
I have to drop off too. Sorry, homework.
Okay, we still have a quorum, so have a good night,
Okay.
JJ.
Thank you.
Our next item is a discussion for 2026-03 zoning regulation text amendment to Articles 4, 6, 7, and 9 regarding public realm exemptions. I'm going to pass it over to Steve for the updates on this regulation.
Sure, and I'll go through this quick, assuming I can find it. So this was like the last we had a whole series of regulations. Like there were about 10 amendments we were working on. There was this one which was really talking about the necessity for public realm under certain development scenarios, and where we kind of left it was we narrowed in on the zones we thought were appropriate, but just under what circumstances they could be exempt. So we just kind of thought about it a little further and modified the text to show the two potential opt-outs. One is within the CD3C zone, which, if you can recall the zoning map, that basically is the Route 1 corridor and the main avenue corridor. So for developments that are less than 30 units, they can be exempt, or if they have historic structures. And that is consistent with what the regulations kind of get at today. So I don't think there's a change there. The second change is the one that I think we had the most discussion about, was within the CD4 zone. Can you exempt developments if they're less than 30 units? And the commission said, can you give us basically some standards that we can apply, so it's not subjective, and that we know if and when the possibility exists. So we put together two criteria. One is that it's on a downtown street, and I had put a map at the bottom of the memo that would show kind of the example of those streets in South Norwalk. And then the other one is a distance to like another public park. And I'll scan down to the map, because where I think where I settled on or recommending the 500 is this map is 1,000 feet. So for reference, Washington Street is here. Here's Water Street. Here's South Main. Here's Ryan Park. So if you did, and I took 19 Day Street as kind of the example we were working off of, if you did 1,000-foot circle around that, that takes care of all of South Norwalk. So I'm like, boy, that's a really big area to exempt off of that. So then I looked at 500 feet, and I think that seems to be a much more realistic standard, which is really like kind of like a 2 to 3 block walk for somebody. So I think that's much more realistic, in terms of what you can anticipate for having that exemption. And then the last schematic was just kind of showing what those streets are. So if you're on these kind of side streets, which would be like Haviland and those kind of streets, and you are within 500 feet of another park, then you can be exempt from providing public realm for developments under 30 units, but you do still have to pay that fee. So it's not like you're not having to do something, it's just you're not having to provide that little piece of green space on your property. So that's kind of the gist of the changes.
Steve, can you go back up to the 500-foot? Yeah, okay. All right.
And down the, just keep in mind this, you're not voting on this tonight, so it's still got to go to public hearing. So if at a certain point down the road you say, you know what, 500 is too big or whatever, you could modify it at that point. I think that wouldn't change the intent of the regulation, just would modify the proposed text a little bit.
I think 500 is a good radius. It's a couple-minute walk. Looking at these blocks in particular, trying to think about like how long it would take me to walk. Like if I was leaving 19 Day and trying to go towards the edge of the boundary. Yeah.
And that's the gist of it. So if the commission's comfortable with the proposed changes, we can start the referral process. You won't see this probably, I'm going to guess, until your first April meeting, maybe your second April meeting. So still some time to think about it, and we can make further modifications as you guys feel are appropriate.
I'm comfortable with it, Steve. Thank you.
Yep.
Same. My only concern is about the public spaces fund. We'll want to make sure that exists before we adopt it. But
yes, we will iron that piece out as well.
Yep. Great.
Okay.
Wonderful. All right. The next item on our agenda is acceptance of minutes for the January 21st meeting.
Move their approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We'll do this with a show of hands. All those in favor? All right. All those abstaining? All right. Caitlin's abstaining, and that's everyone. All right. So that carries. Comments of the director.
Just a couple meeting notes. You do have your special meeting for the capital budget public hearing is next Wednesday night. I will unfortunately not be with you for that exciting evening. And we're working on, we have an amendment that to the POCD. You guys just did one for the arts and cultural plan. The city completed a strategic harbor plan that is ready to get approval and move through the process. There's not a lot of land use changes with that, if any. It's really more internal operations and functionality of the Harbor Management Commission and within the harbor with moorings and access and street ends. So it's not something you guys are going to directly get involved with, but it's important to give that plan a little more weight when we start looking at funding sources for some improvements that the city might realize. So we're going to propose an amendment to the POCD to incorporate that plan into the city's kind of overall long-term planning. With that, I have the consultant. We've already kind of spent the budget on that. So we're trying to keep additional funding as low as possible. So what I might propose to Josh Goldstein, who chairs the EDC Committee of Council, is seeing if you guys can kind of piggyback on one of their meetings, upcoming meetings, where the consultant can propose walk you guys through the plan and answer questions. So you guys would be probably a joint meeting, or if you couldn't attend, you could watch the video, and as opposed to me having that consultant make the same presentation to 3 or 4 different city bodies, just trying to be as economical as possible. So that, just put those 2 things on your radar.
Much appreciated. Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Are there any comments of commissioners? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Anna. Is there a second? All right. All those in favor. Have a good night, everyone. See you next Wednesday.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.